Who would have thought, honestly, that we'd go from Codex Bestie Dane in Fourth Wing to Eyes Here Daddy Dane in Onyx Storm? Not me, but I'm
Not
here
me.
for it, though.
It's funny you wrote a Codex Bestie to Eyes Here Daddy Dane, because I wrote from Damn It Dane to Daddy Dane. Very similar sentiment. Whatever you want to call it, I'm here for it.
Welcome back to the Book on Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Marie, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Rebecca Yarros does not play with her last 100 pages. Not only was it full of thrilling moments, but I also feel like there are just so many little tidbits of information that we are going to need to remember, because I can just tell it's stuff we probably won't fully understand until, at bare minimum, we finish the book. But probably even beyond that. All I can say is, while I'm glad Mira is alive, what if Malik's price is Xaden turning ASIM by the end?
No. I mean, here's the thing. Going into this book, there's two options, right? Xaden progresses further or he gets cured. We've still got 2 giant books to go. So you kind of know going into it, he's probably not going to be cured. From the beginning, I was kind of like, I'm probably not going to be happy at the end of the book. And I still feel that way.
A lot of anger, a lot of devastation to come.
And you just need to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm like, just get it over with.
As a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast. We have only read up to the chapters we are covering and no further, so we have no idea what's to come in the rest of the book. With that being said, we will be discussing chapters 50 through 55 specifically, but it is likely that references to the previous chapters, as well as Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, will come up as well. If you are not caught up, then definitely stop here and then come back when you are. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. We have one deep dive book episode left. So next week, we'll finally have finished Onyx Storm with chapters 61 through 66. Next, if you want to see Addison and I turn Venin, then the very best way for you to do that is to leave us a review. As you probably heard.
That's your price? That's all you want is someone to write a single review and you'll just turn just like that? You will trade a piece of your soul for a review? Wow.
Yes, I will.
Speak for yourself. I'll only turn Venin for Xaden.
This is on behalf of the podcast, okay? It's good for all of us in the end, so you're welcome. The sacrifice is worth it.
Well, Violet will cure us later. You know, she'll be fine.
That's true. That snake on a far-off island and its venom.
Oh my God.
Or love. One of the two. Probably the love. Point being, we go feral for affirmation, and we will turn Venin, or maybe we'll turn into a little golem with this precious little ring or something. If that interests you, then feel free to do that. Finally, we do plan on doing a theories episode after we finish the book. So if there's anything in particular that you want us to discuss, or if you have a theory that you'd like to present, then please send us an email or DM us on Instagram. We're very excited to be able to dive into theories and read everything once we finish the book. Honestly, I'm kind of salivating just thinking about it. So
I already have that Reddit Fourth Wing page bookmarked, and I'm going to scroll back to January 21st, and I'm going to read literally every single post. So.
All right, so let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report, where Addison will summarize each chapter, and next we will convene a meeting of the assembly, where we will deep dive, analyze, and theorize each chapter. Finally, to end the episode, we will share our favorite moments from the set of chapters discussed. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Chapter 56. We're back in another of Xaden's nightmare with the sage. Things seem to be going like they always do until Violet realizes that she's in Xaden's dream. The realization does something to Violet, and suddenly she's able to move freely through Xaden's dream as herself. But they aren't alone. The sage appears again, and this time talks to both Xaden and Violet. The sage warns them both that time is up and an attack is imminent. Violet wakes herself up from the dream using pain, and Xaden also wakes up, and they begin to discuss what the hell just happened. But they are interrupted by Garrick, who has brought bad news. They have 5 hours to get to Drathis, or Mira is dead because Theophanie has her. Chapter 57. It's absolute pandemonium in the assembly chamber as everyone fights to be heard. Violet, Xaden, and Brennan go back and forth on the best course of action, which only gets more complicated once Trissa and Felix arrive and throw in their 2 cents. Brennan orders basically everyone out of the room and tells Violet that trying to save everyone will cost them everything, and she has to pick one objective. Violet tells Brennan she would choose to kill Theophanie, which was not on Brennan's bingo card, but he decides to roll with it and starts giving orders. Chapter 58. Violet, Xaden, Brennan, and Bodhi make their way to Drathis, where they find far more wyvern than they estimated, and Theophanie holding a blade to Mira's throat. In the words of Taryn, she dies for this. They approach Theophanie, and Violet tells her they held up their end of the deal, and it was time for Theophanie to hold up hers, until she pointed out they brought the wrong brother. Garrick shows up in the nick of time with Jack in the ribosad chest, but here's something you need to know about Venin. First, is that they're careful with their words, and second, they also lie. Theophanie drew the blade across Mira's neck, slitting her throat. Chapter 59. Violet and Brennan rush to Mira's side, and Brennan begins trying to mend Mira's wound. Violet screams at Malik to any of the gods that will listen that they can't have Mira. It seems like Mira's wound is too severe and Brennan won't be able to save her, but Sloane arrives with Dane right on her heels. Turns out Arik sent Sloane to deliver some of his mail to Violet in the middle of a battle? Violet will throttle Arik for that later, but for now, it was a small miracle Sloane was there. Dane, who I will now be referring to as Daddy Dane, tells Sloane, eyes here, fucking swoon, and talks her through transferring power into Brennan. And thank the gods, it worked. After it's confirmed Mira is solidly in the land of the living, everyone disperses to play their role in the plan. But ain't nothing in this book can ever be easy, and Bodhi tells Violet they have a problem. Chapter 60. Bodhi and Violet prepare for the impending fight, and that means just standing there and waiting, which does actually seem a little anticlimactic. But it isn't long before Theophanie appears. Theophanie gives us just enough info to drive us crazy, but not the answers we have been so desperate for. Bodhi decides there's been enough talking and tries to counter Theophanie's signet, but Violet quickly realizes 2 very important things. Number 1, Bodhi cannot counter Venin's signets, and number 2, Theophanie isn't a lightning wielder. She's a storm wielder. Realizing they are outmatched, Kira quickly scoops up Bodhi and flies him to safety, leaving Violet to face Theophanie. Theophanie's storm picks up power, and it seems like Violet is going to lose until she cleverly knocks Theophanie to the ground using a Marasite arrowhead. Violet runs and prepares to strike, but Theophanie pins her to the ground. And that concludes the book report.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I have to admit something about Kira just like swooping up in there and snatching Bodhi. It's so funny.
Yes, he was like, not today, friend. Bye. Poor Bodhi.
I know.
Bodhi really is in like the worst position because he really has no autonomy because of his importance to everybody personally, but also to Tyrandor. They almost like protect him more closely than they do Xaden. And it's sort of infantilizing. Like, no wonder Bodhi is filled with rage. He's like, I'm fine. You know, I feel bad for Bodhi.
And then for your dragon to reinforce that too.
Dude, right?
We'll talk about it a little bit more
in
totally. The episode. But anyways, thank you for that book report. That was excellent. And without further ado, let us convene our meeting with the assembly, starting with some overarching thoughts.
I'll keep these brief, but I just wanted to say I love this set of chapters. This is the kind of action I have been waiting for. And I am really excited and also extremely nervous to finish this book. As Violet says, my breakfast threatens to reappear because I'm not feeling good. When we ended in like such a terrible place. Violet is about to stab Theophanie. Theophanie is about to slit Violet's throat. I'm like, oh, trying to close the book.
The wyvern are coming. Everybody's in different places.
Yes,
like you
where is
Xaden? Is Tiny going to be okay? Is Tiny going to wake up? Is Mira going to wake up?
Also,
questions.
Where the fuck is Taryn? I mean, I know where he is, but god damn it, if he is never fucking there while Violet's in danger, are you kidding me?
Okay, but this time Violet sent him away. This was not like him doing dragon business like on his own time.
No, I know.
Violet was like, no, you need to leave. Taryn was like, I don't know. Violet insisted, and then as soon as Taryn leaves, Theophanie shows up. And I'm just like, God damn it.
I know. Well, and honestly, my first thought was like, fuck Tiny. Like, Taryn being there for Violet's more important. But then I remembered if Theophanie drains and kills Tiny, then Mira dies because her dragon will be dead. So, like, they really do have to move Tiny to safety. So
Right.
I'm like, okay, fine. My second overarching thought is just a fair warning to you all. You will be hearing about my love for Dane at length in this set of chapters, so prepare yourself. It should not come as a shock to you because I think from the very first time we started talking about Fourth Wing, I was like, I'm a Dane defender. I've always loved Dane, misguided a little bit in Fourth Wing, questionable choices, but he's my boy. I mean, come on, eyes here, get the fuck out of here. Who didn't love that? Who didn't?
What a glow up.
What a glow up. Oh my God.
Dane can put his eyes, wherever he wants.
Concur. Retweet.
I didn't have any overarching thoughts because I was like, Addison's got it. So
I got it.
I won't be redundant. Retweet to everything Addison said. Yes. So that concludes our overarching thoughts. And now let's get into the chapters, starting with chapter 56, the excerpt. This basically flows right into discussions we've had on an ongoing basis about Tyrandor and the resources. In correspondence between King Tari and Duke Xadi, Tari orders Tyrandor to restore the production of Palladium, stating consequences will be dire, not only for the province, but the continent. We know from chapter 55 that Navarre and Tyrandor are at odds right now after Tyrandor agreed to take civilians against the Cenarium's orders, which caused the king to station troops along the border between Caldir and Tyrandor. Forge production at Biscayeth is at a standstill until the king agrees to continue in alliance with Tyrandor without requiring a new provincial agreement and ensuring that the Eurasian riders would be safe in Navarre. This literally puts Tyrandor in prime negotiating position because the king could be like, F you, but what's that going to get him? A severely underdefended kingdom and a very strong likelihood that Tyrandor would indeed become independent, as we've been discussing for several episodes at this point. I really don't think the king has the choice but to concede to Tyrandor's terms because otherwise they're going to meet Malik at the hands of the Venin real soon.
Wow, you really just laid that out there like, bitch, you're going to meet Malik, so decide.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're totally right. I think King Tari is just doing a lot of blustering here. He's really all bark and no bite. This has been an ongoing discussion for the last few episodes, but there really isn't a lot Tari can do. His options are to agree to the alliance with Tyrandor without the provincial commitment, or he can start a civil war, which he cannot afford to do. He doesn't have the weapons or enough soldiers to do that and fight the Venin, not to mention Tyrandor will fight back, which means it would be at best weeks, but probably months or even years, if ever, before Navarre could defeat Tyrandor, gain control. Then they would have to rebuild and establish a ruling force there, all of which would delay or completely halt the mining and distribution of Palladium, which they cannot survive without. I just don't see how Tari can win here. Because you have to remember, the Palladium isn't just to fight the Venin, it's also to bolster the wards. And I think a lot of people skip that part. And so they really do need a continual supply of Palladium. And so what the fuck is he going to do? Meet
Concede.
Malik?
That's what he's going to do. Yeah. All right. So moving on. Another one. If y'all are familiar with DJ Khaled's work, then you get this reference.
Okay. I was so confused. I highlighted this yellow because I was like, was this like a song you didn't want to forget? I was so confused.
No, he's a DJ, but he always like his like signature line for all of the songs that he works on is like another one.
Oh, well, I know who DJ Khaled is. I didn't know if that was like a song title. The only thing I know about DJ Khaled is in every song, he's like, DJ Khaled, like he says his name in every song.
Yeah, exactly. And then he follows that with another one.
Oh, okay.
So.
It's funnier now that you've explained it to me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so Violet dreamwalks into another one of Xaden's usual nightmares, and this time we get some interesting updates. For the first time, Violet realizes that the dream is Xaden's while she's actually still in the dream. So we'll start with the details. Xaden stands in a field near Drathus, where he's worried about reaching Tairn, quote unquote, in time so he can find her, quote unquote, as battle erupts around the city. There is a storm going on, which Xaden is actually grateful for because it gives him hope and will give her the edge she needs. There's blue and green flames that are erupting along the city's wall, and Xaden attempts to run toward the city to use his shadows, to put out the fires. He says, shadow beats flame every time. But it is at this moment that the conscience of Violet realizes that she is Xaden and is in his dream. It says, awareness prickles the back of my neck, and the realization does something that feels like a snap across the back of my skull, thus creating a separation of Violet from Xaden in this dream for the first time that we've seen so far. Violet calls out to Xaden, who reminds her that she isn't safe here, while Violet then attempts to figure out what keeps Xaden in this particular dream. This is when the freaking sage appears and not only takes credit for keeping Xaden in this dream, but also realizes Violet is also in the dream, and he addresses her as both a lightning wielder and a dream walker. Violet tries to get Xaden to wake up, but the sage tells her he can't, and then tells Xaden, you lost something I wanted, but you will bring her, before he does his thing where he puts Xaden in the air, per usual. The sage continues with a cryptic warning that we have the advantage, and if you will not deliver her, then she will come herself. And then specifically to Violet says, it's simple, Dreamwalker, you come or she dies. Violet thinks that she needs pain to break from the dream spell, so to speak, and she ends up pulling out a dagger with a, quote, polished wooden handle and stabs herself with it. Just as she does this, she wakes up back into reality. With the details out of the way, now let's do some dream interpretation.
Ooh, who knew that my one class on Freud was going to come in helpful?
I love some psychology.
So before I put my college degree to work, I have an overarching thought about this chapter that I know is quite literally impossible to answer based on the information we receive. So I guess we'll just call it food for thought. How is it possible that Violet still has the magical ability to dreamwalk even though her magical bond with Indarna has been severed? I know Xaden says maybe the power is gone, but the ability still remains. But that is not an acceptable or satisfying answer to me in any way, shape, or form. Honestly, I can't say it's a plot hole because I don't know all the rules of magic, but I really didn't like it. Also, it occurred to me in this chain of thought that the implication of this reality would be that Jack Barlow would also still have his signet power despite the bond with his dragon being eliminated when she died. I also think it's important to note at this moment, we actually do not know what Jack's signet was. Everyone thought it was pain projection because of the pain he inflicted on Violet during their mat challenge, but Rebecca Yarros confirmed that was a Venin ability, not his signet. But if Violet's bond with Indarna can be broken, but she still has her signet, then it would stand to reason that Jack would also still have his signet. And I'm wondering if that's very intentional that Rebecca Yarros has not revealed to us what Jack's signet was.
Sorry, I had to process for a second because I'm like, I'm trying to
your face, you were like...
Well, okay, so to the first question, I think Violet's ability still exists because, as we've been speculating, I know you think is actually gone. I think whatever Leothan didn't fully cut the bond, but Violet doesn't know that, and I would imagine Indarna doesn't really know either because Indarna doesn't know that much about how Iran magic works. So that's like my way of explaining that first part. Now, as far as Jack's signet situation goes, so Jack turned Venin first, and then Bade died. And we know at that point, Jack had control of Bade. He'd switch who controls who or like how the bond works or whatever because he was Venin. And so this isn't an explanation. I guess it's just another question of, did Jack manifest the same signet or like keep his signet because he turned Venin? Or did he get a different signet? But I would imagine that maybe the Venin part sustained the signet.
Yeah, like if Sigale died, would Xaden still be a shadow wielder? Because to me, I would say yes, because if we're going with the logic of the ability still remains, when you're Venin, you just have a different power source. Once you've learned how to do it, you can do it indefinitely. It's whether a dragon powers it or channeling from the earth. So I don't know, but it does make me wonder.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would like to know also. I would imagine that not getting an answer about what Jack's actual signet is, though, is probably intentional.
I would think so, right? Because I think the way she writes signets is one of the strongest elements of her book. To my knowledge, based on just interviews and context, when she does not reveal a signet, it's for a very specific purpose. It's important. A.K. Arik. Looking at you, Arik.
That's so crystal clear at this point. So.
Oh my God. Yes.
All right, so as far as this dream goes, first and foremost, it's definitely a present tense dream with the sage because he knows that the Eurasian wards have been raised and continues insisting that Xaden deliver her to him. I am still assuming that her is referring to Violet at this time. Next, in the last episode, we discussed whether these dreams and nightmares had any foretelling type stuff going on, primarily in relation to Xaden's nightmares. I actually feel more convinced now that there is, but it's actually kind of a combination of both foretelling and foreshadowing. And here's why I think that. As far as foreshadowing goes, the setting of the dream takes place in a field near Drathis, and there's a battle going on over the city while green and blue fire erupts around them. The color of the fire indicates to me that Wyvern are a part of this battle. These details line up pretty much exactly for the battle that happens in the next several chapters. We also have the sage speaking to both Xaden and Violet. He warns Xaden, "I'll be a more merciful teacher than Theophanie," which also aligns with the competitive, non-friendly dynamic we know exists between Berwyn and Theophanie. The sage also says, if you do not deliver her, then she will come herself. And that feels pretty heavy-handed, though I feel that has some double meaning for who the sage is referring to, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I think. Finally, the sage tells Violet in this dream, it's simple, Dreamwalker, you come or she dies. And that is a direct warning of the fact that Mira has been taken and is in peril, which again becomes the bait for Theophanie to get Violet.
I completely agree with all of your analysis here, but I want to make a distinction that I think is important. You and I are both in agreement that Xaden's nightmares clearly have some foretelling, foreshadowing, premonition, whatever you want to call it, properties. So far, to our knowledge, Violet has only walked into Marin's dream and Xaden's. Xaden is a Venin, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Marin is not. That distinction is important because I strongly believe that because Xaden is a Venin, it opens his mind to be connected to the Venin and specifically the sage. And that is how he's able to invade his mind while he sleeps and communicate with him in real time about real-time events and hold him prisoner in the dream. And to a certain extent, actually hurt Xaden's physical body. We know Violet describes like Xaden is arcing his back and gasping for air. I don't think he can kill Xaden or physically mar him. I think it's more like he can convince Xaden's mind that he's struggling for air, when in reality, he's fine. All of this is to say, I don't believe that Marin's dream had premonition properties, and I don't believe that other dreams Violet will eventually enter in books 4 and 5 will have foretelling properties either. I think that is very possibly unique to Xaden's dream for all of the reasons I just mentioned. Now, of course, I'm only basing this off the examples we have. I fully stand to be corrected in book 4. But to my knowledge, I think that's how it's going to go. I also think there's some element of, are the dreams taking place in the past more as memories, or are they more in the present? Because that would also determine some of the foretelling, foreshadowing properties. So there's obviously a lot of questions surrounding it. And I'm sure this will be an ongoing conversation for the next 2 years. But that's my 2 cents.
I think the Venin specific thing is a good point because we do see Theophanie make some comments as well that seem to indicate that she knows about stuff that could happen in the future. And I was
have
like,
a note
what
about
is
that
that
later.
about? So
totally.
I don't know exactly, but I agree that there's probably some influence specifically regarding the fact that Berwyn is a Venin and so is Xaden within these dreams and whatever link these Venin have together. So next, the reason I feel like there is some foretelling is because I think the sage has been subtly showing Xaden this battle for a while and has been influencing what he'll do when this battle comes. Most prominently with the last couple dreams he's had. Ultimately, I think we are getting kind of like a sneak peek of something that happens with Xaden after they rescue Mira and Violet faces Theophanie alone in the field. Like I'm talking after Bodhi gets swooped up by Cure. I say this because in the dream, the storm is taking place and he thinks, the storm gives me the one thing I can never really afford. Hope. The rain might make flying a pain in the ass, but it will give her the edge she needs. Xaden's number one concern has been to keep Violet safe, and we know he specifically tells her later in chapter 59, do not turn, do not die, accomplish your mission, I will find you after. And then we see that he leaves the scene to do whatever he needs to go do battle-wise. Since we only have Violet's POV so far, we really have no idea what Xaden is doing. Is it possible Xaden is going to have a one-on-one real-life encounter with the Sage? And just to reiterate, we do think this Sage is Berwyn. Basically, it feels like there are applicable moments to things that happened with Violet meeting Theophanie in the field and facing off against her, while simultaneously, I think there's going to be something separate happening between Xaden and Berwyn that we're not really going to be privy to because we only get Violet's perspective.
I agree with everything you're saying here. I think it's really, really important as we go through this set of chapters and the last 6 to remember we're only getting Violet's POV. And as we kind of alluded to the beginning of the episode, there's so many battles happening in so many areas with all of our characters. Everyone is doing something important that will have implications for everyone across the board, but especially Xaden. And the fact that Xaden just disappears is alarming, but also super important.
Yes. The next topic is definitely the implication of the Sage's power as most likely a fellow Dreamwalker and what he says. We see that the Sage holds Xaden in the dream because Violet asks, "Why can't you escape this place? What keeps you here?" And the Sage responds, "I do." That implies to me, with this signet, one can determine what a person dreams about and perhaps brings them to specific dreams in order to influence them in some capacity.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't considered it from that perspective, but I think your logic is really sound. The only counter I'll throw in is that it's possible the quote-unquote Sage can do this to Xaden because they're both Venin, and that connects their conscience. Plus, we know that lower rank Venin feel pulled or called to a Sage, so it's possible that this ability is unique to just Xaden / the Venin.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be like a blend of both. We also see that the Sage insists Xaden cannot wake up, at least not on his own, which I'm assuming is because the Sage has control of Xaden since it's his dream. It feels like without Violet's interference, Xaden would kind of maybe remain in the stream until the Sage decided it was over.
Or until I think what Xaden experiences that would be pain in the dream. Like when the Sage runs the sword of Tyrandor at his chest, that seems to always be what wakes Xaden up. So I think it's either pain or the Sage is like, all right, I'm out. See you later.
Meeting is over.
Meeting adjourned.
I also found it really notable that the Sage says to Xaden, "You lost something I wanted, but you will bring her." What do you think the Sage is talking about? And there's like 2 parts to this sentence, right? So first, what was lost? Is this like the Sword of Tyrandor or some other heirloom weapon? Is it about Jack Barlow? Is it about a dragon?
So to me, there are only 2 logical answers. Number 1, it's an object we have not been made aware of yet, either because Xaden actually doesn't know what he wants, which seems unlikely, or Xaden has not told Violet because he doesn't want to worry her. It's the same reason he's never told Violet about these very vivid, reoccurring nightmare interactions with the Sage. Or 2, it's Andarna. That is the only thing that has been, quote unquote, lost in this book. The thing that gives me pause about that is that Xaden didn't lose Andarna. And even if she was still around, how the fuck was Xaden bring Andarna anywhere, let alone to the Venin? And how could the Sage reasonably expect him to accomplish that? So there's a lot of questions around that. But Andarna is clearly more special and powerful than we even realize. So it makes her a good candidate for something the Venin would want. And we know later Theophanie is like, you lost your Irid, you're important. The Irid made you more special, whatever. And so those are the only 2 thoughts that I had that sort of aligned with what he's saying here.
I agree with the Andarna thing, and that kind of leads into the next topic that I have. So the second part of what the Sage says, "You will bring her," it feels like the Sage is talking about 2 different things within this conversation. I think the non-italicized her is Violet, but then the italicized her is something different. For example, in the line, "We have the advantage, and if you will not deliver her, then she will come herself." And the only things that make the most sense are some kind of dragon, either Sigale or Andarna. And if that's the case, then I would lean towards Andarna, because as an Irid who is straight up magic, I can only imagine what a prize that would be for the Venin. We also know that Violet has been described as the leash that can bring Xaden to heal. And Theophanie has also expressed extreme interest in Andarna, who is bonded to Violet. We know at this time that Andarna is gone, but I was also wondering, is this some foreshadowing for her return? Is Andarna somehow also going to sense that something, like maybe it works both ways because, I've been on my shit about Andarna and premonition stuff too. But maybe Andarna's going to realize she needs to be there, so she's going to come back, thus also fulfilling the sage's comments about you're going to bring her. You know what I mean?
Oh, I don't like that at all.
I don't either, but that's where my brain went. Of course, if we're going to talk about what the sage is doing, then we also have to discuss what Violet is doing with her newfound signet ability. And specifically, I'm talking about the fact that she can separate herself in the dream and take actions to interfere. First of all, I think it's really interesting that Violet describes her realization as awareness that prickles her head, because that prickling sensation has been associated with what it feels like for Xaden to try and read her. Multiple times in Fourth Wing, whenever Violet feels her scalp prickle, that was pretty much code for Xaden probably reading her once we learn that his second signet is being an Intrinsic in Iron Flame.
Oh, that's a really good call out. I didn't even think about the language parallel there, but you're totally right.
I also find it interesting that once Violet realizes she's in another's dream specifically, that's when it separates her as an entity within the dream and made her noticeable by both Xaden and the sage. In addition, we continue to see Violet meddle and seemingly conjure up things to interfere with. She doesn't start off with a dagger in the dream, but after she thinks, this is a dream, and if it were mine, I'd be armed, then she finds the dagger with the wooden handle, which she uses to stab herself and wake herself up. I do find it interesting that once she separates herself, what she does doesn't seem to influence what Xaden does. But I feel like in the past dream, it did, because she was still like Xaden, but she was seeing things through his eyes. So then, is this something that Violet will be able to interchange between? Like, can she separate or integrate herself with whoever's dream she's entered into at will once she gets powerful enough with this signet?
Okay.
Finally, I wonder what Violet noticing that she can feel Xaden's ice-cold hand implies for her signet. Does this mean the dream is more real than we think? Like, how does what Violet does in a dream ultimately influence or affect things in real life?
I took note of this too. I would imagine if the sage can do things to Xaden in the dream that make him have a physical reaction in bed, then Violet would also be able to do the same. Like, that would stand to reason, because our assumption is the sage, aka Berwyn, is a dreamwalker just like Violet. Either way, it is a new and notable development that Violet can physically touch and feel someone in a dream. So we cannot ignore that.
Another thought with the ice cold thing, I wonder just if feeling iciness and coldness and stuff is an indication that the sage has control over Xaden in this dream. Like, that is one of the signals or signs that the sage is calling to him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm also super intrigued by the dagger with the polished wooden handle Violet conjures up for herself, because it says the sage's eyes widen when that happens. Is the sage just surprised Violet could do this as a dreamwalker? Or is there something specific about this dagger that surprised or scared the sage?
Yes, this also immediately stood out to me. I don't think that he would be surprised she can do that, because presumably the sage is a much more developed and knowledgeable dreamwalker than Violet. And so I don't think he'd be surprised that she could pull out a dagger, but it seems likely he's surprised she pulled out that particular dagger. I'll also add that I think it's interesting that this specific dagger that's described is the one that's conjured as opposed to the one she's normally armed with. Remember, she got that set of daggers from Zaddy that are all described very similarly. They have the runes and everything. And it would stand to reason, like, if you're in a dream and you have control of it, you're going to conjure what's comfortable, what's familiar to you. So it seems really odd that she pulled a dagger that she's never seen before, never had before. And guys, I did the work on this one. I opened all the ebooks. I searched wood, wooden, polish, dagger. I checked everything, and I could not find anything. We obviously don't know the significance, but we're going to bookmark it.
I have some thoughts about it later, actually.
Ooh.
So one thing I'm wondering is how it seems like Berwyn is warning Violet about what's going to happen to Mira without explicitly stating it in this dream. I'm referring to the line, "You come or she dies." While it still doesn't seem like they get along, is it possible Theophanie and Berwyn are collaborating with Berwyn's dreamwalking capabilities to influence outcomes that benefit them both? But like maybe there's an extra layer here where Theophanie was playing Berwyn as well, because we literally see that she tries to kill Jack Barlow later. Unless that was what Berwyn wanted her to do. I don't know, but something weird is going on.
Oh, absolutely. I think it stands to reason that Theophanie and Berwyn forged a quick alliance out of convenience and a common objective. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I do think that they were working together. But I also think Theophanie was totally double-crossing Berwyn, I mean the sage, by trying to kill Jack. I keep forgetting that's not confirmed, but it's just so ingrained to me. There's no way it's not Berwyn, so...
Right.
Guys, we truly don't know, but I mean, we've made a pretty good case for why that is. But yeah, I think she's double-crossing them, but I do think that they are working together in this moment.
After Violet wakes up, she manages to wake Xaden as well, and they begin discussing the new developments of this dream, with Xaden knowing Violet was there and Violet separating herself within the dream. I think this is something else we need to add to the drinking game. Violet and Xaden getting interrupted early in the morning or in the middle of the night by someone else. Because it happens again with Garrick this time. Garrick is in bad shape, but relays they were found while on patrol, and he says she ripped us straight out of the sky like a pair of pigeons in a windstorm, and then reveals that it was Theophanie that did this. This is definitely foreshadowing for what we learn about Theophanie's true power later, and in retrospect, it completely changes, what all the other storms were in past scenes of this book, at least for me. We'll talk about it more when we get there.
Yeah, changes a lot of things for us. And especially this line in particular is practically screaming at us. Theophanie is a storm wielder, and she will try to fuck up Violet with a windstorm. Honestly, I'm really annoyed I did not put this together when a tornado popped up out of nowhere back in chapter 10. Like, how did it not occur to me, a seemingly odd, never-before-described weather event happens in the book. Theophanie appears. I'm like, oh, she must be a lightning wielder. I really beat myself up about not figuring this out because I'm like, oh, it's so obvious.
Hindsight is 2020, but you're not alone because it went straight over my head. Did not question it at all.
Not even once.
Garrick also has a message from Theophanie for both Xaden and Violet, which is as follows. He says, they've reached the walls of Drathis. You have 5 hours to bring Bodhi and Violet or she dies. After quick math and realizing that Garrick's shield is actually tiny scale, Violet realizes that Theophanie has Mira. No! This was devastating. We went from island hopping in the middle of the book to battle perilous jump scare hopping for these last 100 pages.
Well, you know what I have to say to this? Mira! No! I will say this does seem moderately predictable, just because Mira is obviously important to Violet, and that would make her easy leverage. But also, all the references we get to Violet worrying about Mira while she's out on patrol, while she's holding the front line, has really helped set us up for this moment. So, to be honest, I wasn't shocked that Theophanie used Mira as a way to get to Violet. That seems pretty obvious, but I was surprised how it unfolded. Let me tell you that. My jaw was on the floor.
Everybody needs a lorazepam.
Totally true.
All right, moving on to chapter 57, the excerpt. This was from page 71 of the Book of Brennan, and he states, what's worse than taking a life is doing nothing while one is extinguished beside you. Keep your eyes forward, Mira. So the direct meaning of this seems pretty clear and applicable to war. I can only imagine how difficult it is to continue fighting when you see a fellow rider or flyer die right next to you, because that distraction can cost you your own life.
Not just in war, but remember, Brennan wrote this during his time at Besgaev, and we know from Fourth Wing there was a lot of death that people just had to witness without intervening. This excerpt made me think about how Violet reacts when Amber Mavis was executed back in Fourth Wing. I know Amber Mavis broke the codex and all that, but it was still really hard for Violet to watch that. So I can only imagine what this would be like for your actual sister. So
Right.
It ain't good.
That was the logical takeaway. But then we have to be fair and consider the conspiratorial take. What could Brennan mean by stating this? Obviously, as a writer, Brennan has seen battle most prominently with respect to the rebellion during which it was thought he'd been killed. But is it possible this is about Naolin? If we assume cost him everything means Naolin did actually die, then Brennan could be referring to watching Naolin die after he saved him from death. That would, however, conflict with Brennan stating in Chapter 2 of Iron Flame that he woke up on a cliffside not far from, presumably, Erasia, because he likely wouldn't have been conscious to witness Naolin dying. So,
But do we really believe Brennan and that's the full story? I think not. I think that was a very ambiguous and easy explanation to explain what went down. Not that I don't love Brennan and trust him, but I feel like there's some missing context and details that could change the narrative there. But we'll save that for the theories episode. Also, to burst the conspiratorial bubble, I'm pretty sure Brennan wrote this during his time at Piscaya, so that puts a little dent in your conspiracy. But you know what?
Yeah.
As I've said, we know nothing. We are nothing. We're just empty vessels for Rebecca to fill an empty, you know? I also took this as direct foreshadowing for what is happening and about to happen to Mira. Mira is quite literally about to almost die in front of Violet. And as of this chapter, Violet knows Mira's life is in danger, and she also knows it's a trap. The smart thing to do, honestly, would be to stay in Erasia and not fuck with Theophanie at all. But of course, Violet can't just stand by and let someone die in her behalf, and especially not Mira.
True that. To continue with the plot, a meeting is immediately convened to discuss strategy for how to account for 3 different issues: defend Drathis, protect the civilians making their way through the Madaro Pass, and rescue Mira. I found it really concerning that they are severely outnumbered. There are hundreds of Wyvern and at least 6 Dark Wielders surrounding Drathis. If we recall from Chapter 44, a group of 12 Wyvern and 12 Venin alone destroyed Suniva, killing 25,000 people. They may have more riders than what was available in Suniva, but still nowhere near enough. On the Eurasian side, they have a 10-dragon riot plus the Nightwing Drift, not including Vizgayath's cadets that are there currently. We do see shortly that the cadets agree to help as well, but it is still going to be rough, to say the least.
I will also say that I think Suniva was uniquely bad because of the strategy that Venin used to burn the entire city down. Not saying they can't do that to Drathis, but I do feel like overall the writers and everybody would be more prepared to contain the fires if they tried that strategy again. I think there's a little fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? I'm not saying they wouldn't try it, but I think the Venin are going to take a little bit different strategy here.
Fool me thrice, can't get got again.
Can't get got. Oh, Rebecca got me every damn chapter in this book.
Violet half listens to the argument ensuing between everyone over who to send out to battle and what to prioritize, but she is, of course, consumed with worry for Mira. She thinks, our last words were in anger. Mira doesn't have time for my fear. It's a 4-hour flight to Drathis, and if we don't leave in the next half hour, we'll be too late. Not just for Mira, but for thousands of civilians as well. Honestly, they really do not have much time to plan anything if they want to meet Theophanie by her deadline.
I felt a lot of anxiety in this scene. I was literally like, everyone shut the hell up because Mira does not have time for this bullshit. I'm glad you're all passionate, but everyone just shut up.
I also found it notable that Violet notes that the Venin have surged in the last 24 hours, ignoring everything else along their path, concentrating on this one target when easier comparable cities remained untouched. I am assuming this is all just to demonstrate how much of a trap this plan is. Drathis is already outside the wards, and if it was purely magic or power that the Venin were after, they could easily drain the area, but choosing not to makes it clear that this is specifically targeted to help Theophanie, get Violet and Berwyn, to presumably get Xaden as well. But in general, why Drathis? This whole sequence feels pretty reminiscent of Resin. It's kind of in the same general area. They're facing the same enemy, just slightly different objective.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of, I guess, logical conclusions you can make based on strategy, proximity, and everything. But ultimately, I think you're correct. It really just demonstrates the Venin are really there for their singular objective, which is to get control of Xaden and Violet. And if they do some draining, wreak some havoc, kill some people, great. But really, They want Violet. They want Xaden.
To the point about this all being one big trap, initially, Xaden and Brennan point out that they don't have enough riders to do all three things, so they'll have to prioritize an objective, maybe two. Arguments break out over whether one of those objectives should be protecting the civilians. After a smart-ass captain snaps at Kat, Sloane charges in with fists swinging, only to be hauled back by Dane. First of all, hell yeah, Sloane. It really feels like the integrated rider flyer squads are truly a team now, and they all defend each other, even against other riders. Interestingly, though, Sloane aims her next punches at Dane, hitting him twice before he stops her. And y'all bet we're on Sloane and Dane watch too.
Oh, yeah.
But actually, I point this out because is this related to Dane's gift from Zenhal? He did get slapped in Zelna, and getting punched seems similar enough, unless the true meaning of the gift isn't going to be that literal. I have another idea of what Zenhal's gift might mean for Dane later as well, but just a thought.
Oh, good. I would like that because I think in that episode we were like, maybe it's karma for his bad choices. So I'd be interested in hearing something else. At this point, I am shipping Dane and Sloane so hard, especially after they're seen together later in the set of chapters. But in this moment, it's described to make contact before trapping her wrists and leaning in low. Whatever he says must register because she gives a curt nod, then retorts with a glare and walks back to formation. First, I'm probably just projecting my wishes onto this moment, but the way this played out in my mind, this scene was just charged with sexual tension. Like the way he grips the wrists and then he leans in low and just a little closer than necessary, like he really gets right up in her face. And then I picture him like really looking directly into her eyes. And like there's this flicker of, am I angry or am I angry? You know what I mean? And honestly, I'm just getting all tingly just thinking about it. I want this to happen. I need this to happen. Second, I want to know what he said to her. I would pay a lot of money to know because I just know he said something good and probably something hot. I want to know what he said.
I mean, the Dane in Fourth Wing probably would have been like, get in line, cadet, or something like that.
He would have been like, you're breaking the Codex rules.
This is not within rider regulations. Behave yourself.
Listen, second year Dane was damaged Dane. He was about the Codex. But Daddy Dane, he's breaking all the rules. Brennan then asks Xaden how long he's going to let everyone fight before he makes a decision. Xaden says, until my tactician gives me a plan that doesn't make me choose between objectives. Brennan says he can't even guarantee 2 successful outcomes, let alone 3. Xaden then says, live up to your reputation and try. This stood out to me because from the moment we're introduced to the idea of Brennan through Violet's eyes back in Fourth Wing, it's noted that Brennan is just this brilliant strategist, and that's how he's risen up in the ranks so quickly. And it's kind of a running joke in the fandom because truly we have yet to see any brilliance from Brennan. So often things happen and Brennan's like, well, I don't know, I'll just have to figure it out. And then Violet rolls in there and she's like, here's what we're going to do. And the best example is how Brennan had been working on the revolution for quite literally years. Violet joins and she's like, hey, maybe we should try and raise the wards instead of arguing with Dakars for the luminary. And they're all like, what? We never thought of that, LOL. And so I just think it's kind of funny that Xaden is sort of calling him out here because I've had that thought so many times. I'm like, brilliant Brennan? Where? Prove it. So we'll see how this battle plays out. Maybe Brennan comes up with a great plan and we're like, oh, how clever. But something tells me maybe not.
Brennan works on strategizing for said plan with help from Garrick that would allow them to meet all 3 objectives using a projection of Dreyfus thanks to Kaori.
It also broke my heart when Xaden and Violet are talking through the bond and Violet says, Theophanie doesn't want to kill me or she already would have. And then Xaden says literally the saddest thing possible. He says, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. There are worse things than dying. You just know that he's talking about turning Venin or the pain he would feel if Theophanie took Violet from him. And either option is awful. I feel like Xaden, as much as we see his suffering, he's suffering even more that we're not seeing. Rebecca Yarros needs to fix this.
Poor Xaden. At this point, Felix and Trissa enter the scene as well, both of whom are primarily concerned with Tyrandor's seat of power and against the idea of using cadets in battle. Xaden notes Panchek has already launched to request reinforcements, and Trissa counters, which we know Malgren won't send. Apparently, that late warning was actually an early warning. Melgren has already proclaimed this battle a defeat, and he's never been wrong. So this is a reference to chapter 55 when Xaden tells Violet Melgren warned him against flying into battle or they'll lose, and they thought he was late with that message. But it turns out he was referring to a battle that hadn't happened yet, aka the imminent one they are facing now in Drathis.
So first of all, it's kind of crazy to me that Melgren couldn't have given a heads up, be like, hey, this battle is about Drathis. There's no details to indicate what battle it's referring. That's kind of annoying. But second, I did find it interesting. Trissa was just so willing to give up and be like, well, Melgren said so guess we should just give up now. Especially odd given the extremely high tensions with Navarre. Why would any of the Oration writers, and especially the assembly members, take their word for it? And especially Melgren's word.
I agree. I found the reactions, her and Felix both, I found the reactions to be a little bit odd, and I have a note about that in a little bit, but agreed. Also, in reference to Panchek, given our discussions about his possible traitor status, this seems like it will be really telling depending on what he does and how it plays out.
Let me tell you, if some Navarrian riders don't roll up in the nick of time to help everybody, Panchek's a Venin. He's a traitor.
It was him. Yeah. I loved Violet's hopeful response, though, when she says, choice determines our future. Melgren's only seen the outcome of one path, which couldn't have had 3 rebellion relics. We discussed the use of choosing and choice terminology in the last episode, and here is another example of how this idea of choice with respect to life paths is becoming kind of a larger scale theme for the book, in addition to love. I also don't see how Melgren could have seen any clear outcome at all. Like, pretty much this entire circumstance involves 3 or more marked ones, so how is he getting any sort of clear vision in relation to any of this?
Exactly. Someone had to say it, so thank you, Lorraine. Exactly. How could he see it? How could he see the outcome of the battle? Xaden, Garrick, and Bodhi all go, which is 3 marked ones, plus Imogen and Sloane, if that counts, not to mention, I don't know, other marked ones too that we don't necessarily know their names or, we're not aware of exactly what their role is in the battle. It doesn't make any sense at all. I also started to wonder what quote-unquote battles Melgren is actually seeing. In my mind, you've actually got 3 different battles going on. You've got the fight for the city of Drathis and the people climbing the Vidaro Pass. You've got Violet and Theophanie, and this is unconfirmed, but we do speculate that whatever confrontation is going to happen between Berwyn and Xaden, right? And so then it kind of bled into this thought of like, what if Xaden does confront Berwyn, and what Melgren is seeing is just Xaden versus Berwyn, 1 marked one, so he can see the outcome. And if Xaden goes to meet Berwyn, he loses, whatever that means.
Ooh, yeah.
So either way, not good. Also, how is he doing that? I don't know. It kind of drives me nuts.
We also, of course, need to call attention to Xaden stepping in to defend Violet's words by telling Trissa she stands at my side, and then Brennan responds, starting to understand the consort missive. I am just waiting for the marriage reveal at this point. It's been made more than obvious that, at minimum, there's going to be like legal paperwork conducted to legally unify Xaden and Violet. I hope that means that we can get some sort of marriage scene, but also it's war and I doubt they have time for something formal. But I'm just twiddling my thumbs, patiently waiting. So
my only holdback on that is that Xaden is so fatalistic about his future, and he's like, you deserve better, and you deserve someone who's whole and not broken like me. And I can't see him marrying Violet, something that's so important, while he's still not himself, while he's still a Venin. So that's my only holdup on that.
Fair enough. We'll see.
One way to find out. Yeah, it's like one way to find out, baby.
We get a wise suggestion from Garrick, who says they should make a different choice and get a different outcome, which leads to all of the present first, second, and third year cadets agreeing to fight against the Assembly's recommendations. So this is the part where I found Felix and Trissa's hesitation sort of odd. I know the stakes are high for Interior politically, and they perhaps feel like sending cadets out is a straight death sentence for them, but you're also severely undermanned, and without all the help you can get, you will for sure lose. Are they worried that Tari and Navarre are going to retaliate against them for sending Biscayth cadets out without explicit permission, or like, what's going on?
I think their mentality is lose the battle but win the war. This has been the theme throughout this book. We saw this discussion thematically play out in the beginning of the book with the attack on Newhall. The commander of the outpost in Samara told Violet and the squad that it just really wasn't worth the risk to save Newhall. It was cold, but it was realistic. I think in war, you have to calculate the risk versus the reward and think about long-term strategy. And if I'm being totally honest, in my most cold and calculating way, with absolutely no regard for the human element, the smart thing to do would probably be just to let Dreythus fall and let Mira die. I know that's cold. That's my Venin side coming out. But listen, one review and I guess I am a Venin. I don't know. The reality of this war is they need quite literally every single rider and dragon they can keep alive. The whole thing is a trap, and we know that will best case only cost Violet and Taryn. And worst case, you lose Violet, Taryn, Xaden, Sigale, and several, if not all, of the riders and their dragons, and the flyers and their, why did I want to say hippogriffs? That's not right. My brain just went to Harry Potter world. I literally forgot what they're called.
Yeah. Oh,
no.
Griffins.
Are they griffins?
Yeah.
My brain literally just drew a complete blank. I just stalled out so hard. Okay, not to mention the flyers and their griffins. And this would basically devastate the long-term outcome of the war. The only strategic point I could make to myself to counter that logic would be that if you let Dreythus fall, the front line gets pushed back even further, closer to Tyrandor and Erasia. But even then, is it worth the risk? And I can't say that it is. I don't know how it plays out, but I sort of get Felix and Trissa's standpoint. You have to remember that they have a very different mentality than what our beloved characters have, right? They've been a part of the revolution for years and years and years and years. They have invested a lot more time and effort into the long-term outcome. And I think they're really taking the emotion out of the decision. But that's kind of the push and pull of this book. How do we balance what's best for everybody? Then you also have to add in the element from Trissa and Felix's perspective. An untrained first year is more of a liability than anything else, which honestly is probably fair. Some of those first years haven't even manifested a signet. They barely know how to hold their seat, and it's a distraction in battle. You think that Rhiannon and Sawyer Riddick are going to let their first years die? No, they would compromise the mission and the objective by trying to save those first years. And so I do kind of get where they're coming from. My hang-up was more when Trissa was like, oh, Melgren said so, guess we better give up. I'm like, we're just going to take Melgren's word for it?
Right. I think they're also older, have seen more similar situations, and kind of have some learning experience to know what battles to fight, essentially. Is this worth fighting or not? So, all right, pay attention, everybody, because this is a juicy part of the conversation. Xaden asks for Garrick's exact words, and he says, she said to bring Violet and your brother, and they'll let Dreythus stand.
I think it's also really important to note that Violet thinks stand or live. Anka was standing when they left it too, which is an excellent point. And you have to remember what we learned later from Theophanie. Venin are careful with their words, and they also lie. So I'm like, okay, yep, that's totally fair. Good that we're thinking through that.
Xaden tenses at the use of the term brother, and then he proceeds to have a mental combo with Violet and Sigale, who adds, you have another one who calls you by the name. This prompts Violet to realize that the first time she'd met Theophanie, she hadn't achieved her rescue objective, leading Violet to conclude that the Venin want Jack Barlow. Definitely hold on to this line because it comes back up again when we meet Theophanie. At this point, Xaden pulls Garrick aside to speak privately. Presumably, this is when they hatch the Rivestad chess plan to bring Jack, while Violet urges Brennan to use her, prompting him to clear the room of everyone but the main decision makers.
I did giggle a little bit when Xaden looks at Garrick and says, you up for a little walk? Because in a way, Garrick is about to go on a long walk and a little walk simultaneously. So I thought that was kind of a clever way to be like, you up for a walk, buddy?
I didn't even notice that, but you're so right. That was witty and clever. I like that.
It was.
So basically, Brennan understands Violet is the unpredictable variable because Theophanie knows you'll try to save everyone like you did in Resin or at Dune's Temple or Bisgayeth before Mom. That's why we'll fail, because you'll choose everyone over yourself and he will choose you over everyone. Can't really argue with Brennan about this because it's true. It's what we've seen over and over with our two read our eyes, and it's what Llewellyn warned about as well.
And it just fits with the overall thematic element of making tough decisions in war that we discussed earlier.
Brennan urges Violet to not fall for the trap by picking one objective, one path. Literally, what a tough position to be in. Violet has been getting many back-to-back lessons of what it means to be in a leadership position because of Taryn and her signet. I also think the emotional struggle she feels is highlighted when just before this she thinks Mira has to come first, but the thought of leaving civilians to be desiccated or our own riders and flyers to die with their bonded ones is too much to fathom. Mom was her own sacrifice. Traeger was luck, being responsible for the deaths of thousands. I also found it notable that Violet thinks Taryn would select one in a heartbeat and Darna would choose them all. But she's gone. And that, first of all, made me really sad. But it also highlights the difference and influence that both of the dragons have on Violet. Taryn will always make kind of the most logical choice without a second thought, while Darna is the big-hearted optimist.
Oh, baby Darna!
Come back! Realizing Theophanie is ultimately hunting her, Violet states, I guess I would kill Theophanie. As much as I love Violet and believe in her capabilities, this did make me super nervous.
I love that Brennan responds with yeah, for sure. That was not on my list, but yeah, we'll go with that. We're just going to kill a Maven Venin. Let me just reassess my brilliant strategy that I had cooking.
I also thought it was funny and ominous when Brennan turns to Xaden and asks if Cadet Sorengale is abducted while securing her objective. And then Xaden responds, Bodhi will make an excellent Duke.
Hot. What a hot response.
Yes, but also affirming everything that everyone has been saying about them. But you gotta love seeing Zaddy do everything for Violet if needed. So
yeah. And you can just almost hear Brennan at least one of you can be taught. You can just hear the sigh of exasperation in his tone, and I love it.
With confirmation that Violet trusts her squad leader to hold position this time, Brennan proceeds with the plan. He instructs Trissa to get runes and Mayor-site arrowheads from the armory and gives one final order to Xaden and Violet respectively to basically just stick to their plans. Operation Rescue Mira commences. Nervous laughter.
So when I was writing these notes, it was the middle of the night as usual. When I read your little in asterisks nervous laughter, I don't know why, but that was so funny to me. I started giggling really hard, and my husband, he was asleep and he was kind of started to shift. I don't know what about that was really funny, but I really enjoyed that. I was yeah, nervous laughter for real.
It's like that meme. I don't even know. It's not a bear. Kind of looks like a Muppet thing. And it's just standing there and it's side-eyeing.
Yes, I've seen. Yes. So what is that freaking meme? I know exactly what you're talking about. Where you're kind of looking around the corner, really wide. And he's
yeah. And then you're kind of just
this will go so well. Yeah.
But anyways, that's the feeling that this has produced. So.
And it ain't good.
Nope. So that ends chapter 57. Moving on to chapter 58, the excerpt. We get another part of Colonel Daxon's guide to excelling in the scribe quadrant. The advice is for cadets to realize that it's the ability to observe and recount that separates librarians from the scribes, not reciting historical fact. So just thematically speaking, I think this ties really well into everything we know. History is honestly much more about who's telling it and what is told rather than what actually happened, especially in the context of this story. Navarre hid and changed so much of true history to paint the narrative that works best for their agenda, but it came at a massive cost in the current timeline of the story. We also still don't know what really happened 630-ish years ago during the Great War and everything with the first six. Outside of the generic, they fought the Venin, we raised the wards to protect us, everybody unified, yay. Quite literally, that's basically all we know. It also reminds me that this entire story was faithfully transcribed by Justinian Yilwart, who, whenever this transcription was done, was the curator of the scribe quadrant. In the context of the story, Justinian was removed from the adept path by Markham back in chapter 13, but instead, she was able to become a full-time researcher for the Quest Squad and do her own research, basically. This actually puts Justinian in a really unique position, because I would imagine that much of the work scribes on the traditional path do is filtered through the lens of Navarre's leadership, which falls under Markham's watch in the scribe quadrant. We've had discussions about Markham's integrity and whether he would be a traitor. While I still can't say he's working with the Venin, he definitely adheres to the general Navarian mindset of skewing and filtering the information according to the story Navarre wants told.
Remember what Violet said. He has the credibility of a drunkard and the integrity of a rat. And that's all you need to know about Markham.
Last but not least, I would love to officially know who Colonel Daxon actually is. Is it Grandma Niara or a different relative of Asher? What does Colonel Daxon know about Navarre's history? I feel most inclined to believe it's Grandma Niara since she's been introduced. And then when you also look at all the excerpts from Colonel Daxon's guide, they do have sort of this tone of providing disguise tips and tricks if you're looking for information that maybe you shouldn't be.
Oh.
But while we're on the topic of Grandma Niara, we know that she stopped talking to Violet's parents after finding out Violet was partially dedicated. So was that the true reason? Was it really because this is considered illegal in Navarre in the current context? Or was it something else about what dedication does to someone that worries her? Does she know something historically about it? Because if she was a scribe.
That's a good point. I never thought about what knowledge she had access to that may impact how she views. Because we really don't know why the practice was banned. We don't know anything about it except for people used to do it and they banned it. So yeah, I don't know. That's a really good point. I did love all of your other points in relation to this excerpt. And I think you raised some good questions. But this excerpt made me ask a different question entirely that I'm not sure I have a good answer to. And that question is, what is the purpose of this excerpt and our story for this chapter? I think Rebecca Yarros has proven she's very intentional with the excerpts and their chapter placements. And on the surface, this seems like a really odd place to put this particular excerpt, given the events of this chapter. I've thought and thought about it, but I cannot make sense of it yet. But I will. Mark my words, okay? Mark my words.
Scribe watch.
Scribe watch, that's right. I'm going to use my scribe brain. I'm going to figure it out, guys.
I will patiently await your report.
Perfect.
So moving right along, a group consisting of Violet, Xaden, Bodhi, and Brennan depart as Mira's rescue squad, and they cut it pretty close to Theophanie's deadline. Tieran reassures Violet in his curmudgeonly manner that they will make it in time, along with the reality check that as the generation's lightning wielder, he says, while your life may not matter more than other riders, your signet does. You are the weapon, and you will have to learn to accept the sacrifice of others in your name if you want to win this war. It's interesting that basically this fight against the Venin has always been about power, and we learn later from Theophanie that Violet is the tipping point. We'll talk more about this in chapter 60, but combined with Violet's former bond to an Irid as well, that makes Violet invaluable to the Venin, and the dragons understand that as well. It seems like whoever has Violet will win this war unless maybe the Irids as a whole intervene or something.
I think it's important to note that the fight isn't just about power, but who possesses the most power, and more importantly, who controls that power. I think that's really ultimately what a lot of it is about, is the control.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, on the topic of the possibility of it's being what's needed to intervene in some way, what if the counter to Violet is the Irids? Like, who has the power to take away Violet's power? Presumably maybe an Irid, because they can theoretically break magical bonds between anyone, really. Because it's weird to me that even though we've been learning that magic likes everything in balance, yada yada, and yet you have Violet who's a tipping point, and there's nothing else, presumably, that counters her or balances her out. You know what I mean? And so then I was like, what if it is the Irids in a weird way?
So I don't really have a response to that, but you did say something that maybe just prompted a thought for me. Okay, so you said you think it's odd that Violet is a tipping point. There's no counter for Violet, presumably based on the information we get in the set of chapters, right?
Yes.
What if Violet is the criterion for the gods?
Oh,
Theophanie says...
was the criterion for the Irids. Violet is the criterion for the gods.
And humans. I know this is a terrible place to put this, but this is happening in real time, guys, so you're just going to go with me on this journey. Theophanie says once every century or so, we get a chance to tip the scales, implying that there is a rider or two or a power or two that doesn't have an auto balance. And it's the control of that person and the choices that person makes that determines which way the scales tip, right? What if Violet is a physical manifestation of a criterion for the evolution of humans and their choices and how they respond to control of that power? Where's the air horn? Pew, 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 pew. Because think about it. It's probably fair to say that magic is a gift from the gods. That's a pretty standard trope in fantasy books. All power has a source. Usually it's divine in nature, or it is nature itself. But we know that because the existence of Venin proves that power can corrupt, and they're treating the gift of power badly. And so nature basically is like, well, let's see if you've earned your right to continue access to that power. Here's the choice, right? Here's the person who will dictate that. And what if Violet is the criterion? And that's why Andarna chose her. Andarna and Violet are sort of mirrors or the balance for each other. One representing dragons who have access to magic, and one representing the humans who have access to that magic. Woo!
Yes. I like this a lot. Yes.
I like this too. I gotta think of this some more.
It also kind of relates back to the idea that we know Violet has kind of this unique relationship with the gods because she was partially dedicated by Dune. There's seemingly this option still out there for her. There is a path for her to go more in line with the gods, I guess, if she wants to. So yeah, I don't know. I like this a lot though. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes, I like this too. I didn't think about this. I know, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, did I just write the plot of book 4 for Rebecca Yarros? If you're listening, just give me a little shout out in the intro or something, you know?
Okay, but anyways, I guess as a side note in relation, when I was under the impression that maybe the Irids might be the balance, still could be, but to finish that thought, I wondered if this is why the Irids have stayed uninvolved. They inherently know that they possess the power as pure magical creatures that can basically sway the balance of magic to whomever they please if they wanted to. The nature of this conversation really makes me think of the quote, "With great power comes great responsibility." Apparently that was originally coined by French author Voltaire, but it was widely popularized by Spider-Man. But regardless, that is both true for Violet and true for the Irids. So
I'm not opposed to this theory. I just feel like I do not know enough about the Irids and what they can actually do with their magic to decide either way. And I highly doubt we're going to find out anything more in the last 6 chapters of the book that will help give us any fuel to this fire or douse it completely, because I don't think we're going to see the Irids again at all, period.
Probably not.
Not in this book, I mean, yeah.
I do think that they're going to become highly relevant, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have met them.
Of course.
Otherwise,
absolutely.
we wouldn't learn that they were pure magic. We wouldn't have learned that Andarna is this criterion with all of them. And so we just need to figure out how, yeah. Anyways, despite this reminder from Taryn, I love that he still supports Violet in this rescue mission for Mira because he knows how important Mira is to Violet. In response to Violet asking if she should have accepted Mira as a sacrifice, he says, "If I did, I would still be in Erasia and you would be walking." Aw. It was very fitting for Taryn to say that in his curmudgeonly, loving way. Next, they approach the field for the meeting once they land, and 2 things stuck out. One, the eastern side of Drathis boasts a covering of wyvern that severely outnumbers them at an incalculable ratio. And 2, Auric was spotted flying south away from the conflict. Violet and I were both really freaking surprised by this because what could he possibly be doing right now? I don't believe Auric and Mulvik are running away, as they seem to suggest. 100% Auric had another vision of some sort. And part of what he was doing was likely retrieving that package he gave Sloane to hand off later.
100% agree. At this point, I'm once again surprised Violet is not using her scribe brain and has at least started to suspect something is going on, because to Violet's own point, it is extremely out of character for Auric to run away from a fight. Normally, he's quite literally arguing. He's fighting so that he can be a part of the fight. Almost to the point that he's like, well, I'm the prince, so you can't really stop me. You know, I know he doesn't really throw his rank around, but it's such an illogical thing for Art to do that I'm surprised Violet hasn't been like, something is going on. Instead, she's like, I'm going to throttle him later, which I do know Violet's got a lot going on. But I feel like at this point, if I was Violet, I'd be like, well, Art is on drugs and he's not making a rational decision, or something really important precognition is going on with him, like
Right.
those are the two options, right?
Is this your
So
signet?
yeah.
Okay, so at this point, I am switching back to the side of Arik knows about his precognition and has not revealed it to anyone yet. It's funny because in our chapter 44 through 49 episode, I was like, oh, he definitely knows about his signet. But then in our last episode for chapters 50 through 55, I forgot I said that and I flip-flopped back to doubting he knew about his signet. But at this point, this is a pretty definitive action to take. I don't think Arik would go flying off with Molvik, nor would Molvik agree to go flying off unless they both were well aware of his signet and the implications of taking action on some sort of precognitive ability.
Oh, absolutely. We always go back and forth on like how much control does a rider have over a dragon, vice versa. But no dragon can face the Empyrean after running away from a fight unless they have a good justification for it. And I think Arik's known this whole time. Maybe the very first time he got a vision, he was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, did I drink too much lavender lemonade last night? But if he didn't, he probably figured it out almost immediately.
Right. So this, of course, does lead to the same question posed last episode of why Arik would choose not to tell anyone about his vision. Addison laid out several really good points last episode that definitely still apply. Ultimately, I really think maybe telling too many people influences their decisions and doesn't allow for options to stay open. A central theme for this set of events has been about choice determining outcomes or making different choices to get a different outcome. And I wonder if by Arik telling other people about what he sees, it would lock circumstances into a specific outcome, which could be both good or bad, depending on how everyone chooses to throw in their chips, per se. It's kind of like Zanal's principle. The individual choices of everyone have to kind of synergize to create a lucky outcome for them because, according to Zanal, luck determines your fate. But you also have to adjust your sails in a storm and adapt if needed.
Oh, that's a really interesting thought. It's like what Violet said in the last chapter. Choice determines our future. Velgren's only seen the outcome of one path. And it also makes me think about how the priestess says Violet's path is still not set, and that makes her future malleable. There's a lot of, I guess,
uncertainty.
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of uncertainty in Violet's future because there's a lot of adjusting of her sails that she can do that change the outcome. Of course, we don't know the nuances of Arik's signet, and to be honest, we don't even know for sure he has precognition. But assuming he does, I would be willing to bet Arik's visions can change as people make different choices, right? And I think we're really going to see that come into play. And I wouldn't be surprised if end of book 4, even book 5, there's a major battle, or I feel like we're going to get some cryptic moment where Arik is like, Violet, it's up to you. Whatever choice you make determines whether we win or not. But he won't tell her what the choices are because ultimately Violet has to make the choice herself. But I feel like we're really getting set up for that trope.
Right, yeah. So they arrive at the field, and it broke my heart to read how Tiny was chained up. I 100% felt the rage that Violet and Taryn described, because how fucking dare Theophanie chain up a dragon and a Sorengale sibling? I was about ready to leap into the story and help them. Retweet times a million when Taryn says she dies for this, because hell yeah. She does.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that line. And when I read that, I was like, we ride at dawn, baby. Like, get your fucking pitchforks. Who the hell do you think you are? A dragon? I don't think so. And definitely not Mira fucking Sorengale.
That's right. So speaking of Zanal earlier, reading the description of how Mira has been beaten up and Theophanie's shifty lie later, was this Zanal's gift? Was the wine bottle actually representative of a blood sacrifice, meaning Mira would be sacrificed?
I think that connection has potential, but to be honest, I prefer my original analysis that Violet and Mira are just going to drink the wine and get really drunk together. So
yeah.
I'm going to block out your words and I'm going to live in my own reality for that.
Okay. Yeah. I would rather be there as well. So
10-4. Okay.
The conversation and events with Theophanie are also juicy, so pay close attention.
I just have to point this out because my brain is really stuck on this detail. It's described, the wind whips Theophanie's long silver braid as her smile cracks her chapped lips. And I point this out because in Xaden's dream, it's described that the sage Venin also has chapped lips. And I want to know, if the Venin are so powerful, why can't they have some magical chapstick? Or like maybe they could buy some? Ain't no way you're going to sign me up to live an immortal life with some chapped lips for eternity. Absolutely not. If my options are turn Venin with unlimited power and immortality, but I have to have chapped lips forever, absolutely not. And I don't know why, but this really bothers me. Y'all can't take a little bit of that power and like magic your lips? I don't know. It's described that way every time, and it kind of gives me the ick.
Rusty, dusty chapped lips.
Rusty, dusty Venin chapped lips. Ugh. And then I'm like, what about Xaden's beautiful lips? Are they going to get nasty and chapped? Like, Violet can't be kissing that. That's not going to work. I don't like it.
You right, though. Like, chapstick at bare minimum, you would think.
If I have magic, I'm going to have clear skin. I'm going to have perfectly, I don't like the word moist. I was going to say perfectly moist lips, but you know what I mean. Okay, I've taken this too far now, but you get my point.
To get back on track, I noted first and foremost that Theophanie tells Violet, and yet you seem to have lost your Irid. How inconvenient. I think this is important because while Theophanie wants Violet, she also wants Indarna because that would be the greatest possible leverage for the Venin. Theophanie has had an ongoing interest in Indarna since chapter 11, and I doubt that has changed.
Agreed. This also begs the question, how does Theophanie know that Violet lost Indarna? It wouldn't be uncommon for Indarna to not be at a battle where Violet was. She wasn't there the first time Theophanie attacked Violet either. So I'm confused how Theophanie would know this unless someone in leadership told her about what happened to Indarna and Violet, because it's common knowledge, right? Like, it's a big deal that Violet has lost one of her dragons. And so I'm looking at you, Pancheck.
Or this is Theophanie's possible semi-premonition abilities too.
I have a note about this later. She keeps just intuitively knowing these things. So either someone is feeding it to her, or like maybe she has a little bit of an intrinsic capability, or she's just really good at reading context. But there's enough moments that it makes you suspicious. Now, I don't want anyone to think we're saying that she's a storm wielder, a distance wielder, and she's an intrinsic. At some point, Theophanie is too overpowered. But it is odd.
It's weird as fuck. And I would like some damn answers.
I'm going to get you a shirt that says that. So. Yeah, I would like some damn answers.
So next, Theophanie looks at Brennan and then Bodhi and says, I didn't ask for either of you to attend. To which Violet says, I thought you requested brothers. Then Theophanie replies, and yet you didn't bring the brother he wanted. Berwyn will be disappointed. At this point, everyone still believes the brother Theophanie and Berwyn are both talking about is Jack Barlow. But I also want to note that Theophanie's response doesn't deny or correct that Brennan and Bodhi are considered brothers. Also would like to point out that when Garrick relays the message in the previous chapter, he says, she said to bring Violet and your brother singular. And yet Violet says brothers plural in this scene. I feel like this is some very crafty foreshadowing on Rebecca Yarros' part. If this is implying what I think it does, I think this is alluding to the Venin possibly getting another brother or brothers. Or is it alluding to the fact that Bodhi or Brennan already are?
I know you're on that Brennan shit. I know you've wondered about Brennan and like what really went down and all of that.
Everybody's wondered about Brennan. I am just providing the news. That's the gossip around town. I am simply relaying the information.
You're just trying to start shit. That's what you're trying to do.
Anyways, following Theophanie mention Berwyn, Xaden repeats Berwyn, and then his focus swings south toward the city again. Violet thinks this is about him needing to go help in battle, but I actually wonder if this is an ode to that nightmare he had and he knows Berwyn is waiting for him.
Oh, that's exactly how I took it. Like something about hearing Birkenstock Berwyn's name triggered something, and it confirmed for Xaden that Berwyn's there, his meeting with him is imminent, and that this nightmare is about to play out in real life.
The calling of the sage. I also found it notable that Theophanie says, I won't make the mistakes with you Berwyn made with Jack. He spills his sage's secrets too easily. And I was like, so number one, Berwyn is a sage? Is Theophanie confirming this, or is she lying?
I wondered the exact same thing. For those of you that have been listening for a while, you and I have been discussing, we're pretty sure Theophanie's a maven, but is Berwyn the same rank as Theophanie? Because it seems like they're competitive with each other. I don't know. It's just interesting because if Theophanie is a maven, like we strongly suspect, that would make her technically ranked above him. But maybe it's like all mavens are sages, but not all sages are mavens. But like power level, it's similar. It's just, have you been promoted to a position of power?
And then they're so corporate.
They really are. They're like, yes, your resume checks out. You drank all of Anka. Absolutely. Promotion.
Did you get the promotion though?
No? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's the equivalent of like, you can have two really powerful fire wielders that have the same level of power, but one's wing leader, one's not.
Yeah,
so power to power, they're competitive. They compete against each other. But like from a rank perspective, technically the wing leader outranks them. That's kind of where my brain is at this moment, because he's just been referred to as a sage the whole time. And we're thinking back down like fourth wing when Violet is finding that Venin on the back of Taryn, and she's like, my sage. And we've just been rolling with that since fourth wing. So I guess so. I'm going to take that at face value, because what would she have to gain by lying about that?
That's true. I don't know. It's just weird.
It is
and like
weird.
If Berwyn is also a dreamwalker with a really strong, powerful signet, then also why are you still a sage? That doesn't check out to me.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like basically all the same things that Theophanie can more or less do, at least that we've seen so far within the dreams. So I don't know what's going on. But see, this is the danger of lying too many times in a book. Now, we can't trust anything. We cannot trust anything that's said. We will question everything. Makes me a little crazy, but
you should have known.
That's nothing new.
In fourth wing, when the end of the book reveals that everything we've ever been taught is a lie.
Okay, the second thing from this conversation. Has Jack continued to feed information despite being jailed? Or do the Venin know everything he told Violet when she interrogated him with Imogen toward the beginning of the book? And then number 3, this does set us up for what Theophanie does in the beginning of the next chapter, because she surprised me time and time again in this set of chapters. Like, truly unhinged chaos queen.
Just like Rebecca Yarros. I mean that very lovingly, okay?
Theophanie was inspired by Rebecca.
Hey, there are some parallels there, right? They're both beautiful, brilliant, terrifying, has the power to make or break me, so there's a lot of parallels there.
So anyways, this leads me to say Theophanie is truly psychotic. But you bet your ass I was on high alert when Violet says, I'm not turning. And Theophanie responds, you are. I'm intrigued to see what the actual catalyst will be. Because I just got such a bad feeling for that minute before we see how the chapter ends. Next, Garrick and Crod arrive just in time carrying the Ribestad chest, and then they unlock it at Theophanie's demand.
This is not important at all, but every time I see Crod written out, I see the word charade. So I was like, you said his name wrong. It's Garrick and charade. And then I'm like, that's not right. Sorry. To get back on track. I don't know if this is important, but I feel like it might become important, so I'm going to point it out here. We know from Iron Flame that Takaris is the owner of the Ribestad chest because Fen gave it to him during negotiations for the rebellion. We also see Takaris use it when he tricks Violet and hides the Venin in there to surprise attack her when they go to negotiate for the Luminary and Iron Flame. This would mean that Garrick would have had to go to Corden first, get the Ribestad chest, then go to Besgaiath, get Jack, put him in it, and then come back to the field outside of Drathis. My question here is, did he just steal the chest from Takaris, or did he have to negotiate for it? Takaris is definitely not the type to just give away something for free, and especially now that he's a king of poor meal, and he likes to collect things or people. So I wonder if Xaden had to bargain something away to get it, and it wasn't like there was a lot of time. So if Takaris pushed, they pretty much had to give Takaris whatever he wanted. Now, granted, with the distance wielding, it's possible that Garrick just fucking morphed right in front of it, put his hand on it, and was like, I'm out. But I did wonder about that. And also, I also put this here too, because I'm trying to begin the process of establishing a timeline for everyone and what's happening in this last 100 or so pages.
No, that makes a lot of sense because I didn't even consider the fact that they had to go get the riboside chest and that was with Takaris. I was just like, oh, we had to go get Jack and Biscaya. But then I was like, wait, yeah, you're right. They didn't have the riboside chest. He literally has been walking all over the continent as they talk about later. But I was wondering, maybe Takaris is sus. I just want to throw that in there because this is an idea I had kind of towards the beginning when they first go to Debrelli. And I was like, Takaris, maybe it's just right place, right time all the time for him. And he's just really lucky. But I was like, he likes to collect things. He has all these relationships with people without anybody else knowing about them. I don't know. He's a little unpredictable to me. So I do still kind of wonder if there's something a little fishy going on with him. But yeah, I too would like to know if they had to bargain something to get the chest. And if so, what? I also found it interesting that Taryn informs Violet of Jack's state, describing him as emaciated and wan, which immediately made me think of Asher's excerpt from chapter 32, where he describes the vegetation in Unreal as being wan. We still have yet to get any direct confirmation about the color situation on the Isles, but implication works both ways, meaning magic is drained away, it produces paler colors, or the inverse applies, with the vibrance of magic on the continent being because of the magic that's present. So anyways, feeling they'd met Theophanie's demands in time, Violet states our end of the deal is fulfilled, so let Mira and Tiny go. But the first thing to learn about the Venin is that they're careful with their words. And the second is that they lie.
Okay, so I'm going to say something unpopular opinion here. I know Theophanie is terrible and we hate her, but I'm going to be so honest. You have to admit, she's got style. Like, she puts on a good show.
Yeah.
She's good at being bad because how kind of badass, like, here's what you need to know. We lie. It's kind of cool.
Yes.
Like, she's bad and I hate her, but like, baby got style, you know?
Oh, I literally have that same thought in this next chapter. So.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah,
okay,
same.
good. Because I was like, I don't want to compliment Theophanie, but I mean, that was just fucking cool.
It was iconic. So.
Iconic, yes.
But anyways, to end this chapter, Theophanie got me real good when she only affirms that she'd let Drathus stand, and then she slices Mira's throat. And I was like, ah!
Like actual screaming. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought Mira was a goner for sure. Absolutely thought she was done for.
Mira's dead.
She's dead. She gone.
Honestly, when I thought something bad was going to happen earlier, I just thought it was going to be like Theophanie draining the ground or ambushing them with more Venin or something like that. I genuinely did not see her trying to kill Mira.
See, I thought that she would drain the ground and kill Tiny and Mira would die in Violet's arms, just like Liam all over again.
Oh, that would have been really tragic.
Terrible. I cannot live through another It's Been My Honor. That was enough for me.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Bye. Okay, so that ends chapter 58. Moving on to chapter 59. The excerpt. This was from a work titled The Sacrifice of Dragonkind by Major Deandra Naveen. It discusses the risks dragons took by bonding humans, the biggest risk relating to the vulnerability of humans, which by extension makes the dragons vulnerable as well. Specifically, it states many dragons suffered the loss of their bonded riders in the name of self-preservation. We are already aware that dragons experience grief from the loss of their rider, but it will not necessarily kill them. I did feel like this humanizes the dragons because it seems like dragons can become quite emotionally attached as well. However, it also seems to make clear that if a dragon's life is on the line, they will endure the loss of their rider in order to survive. We know Irids can sever and change magical bonds, but as far as we know, the other dragons cannot do that, which leads me to wonder, I guess, what contexts this excerpt refers to. Is this strictly about riders dying? Could it also allude to riders turning Venin? I don't know.
I think it also shows that dragons made a real tangible sacrifice in order to preserve their species. Dragons, and when I say dragons, I mean the Empyrean, not the Irids, they value strength, cunning, and brutality. And so for them to be willing to make themselves vulnerable in any way, they had to be extremely desperate.
So we pick up right where we left off as Theophanie's sick performance begins. And this is where I had my moment that you just had. because as much as I hate this, Theophanie was peak villain icon when she said, "Time to play, Violet." In my head, I pictured her as the Joker with like this crazy grin and her veins are all like red and webbed around her eyes. She just looks crazy.
That's funny because in my mind, she's Maleficent from The Sleeping Beauty. She's very similar. Like she carries herself and she's cool and she's like, I'm through with waiting. I don't know. That's just how I see it in my mind.
But to continue with the chaos, Theophanie hurls a dagger at Jack, which I did not anticipate whatsoever. So in chapter 56, I wondered if Berwyn and Theophanie were possibly collaborating, mostly because Berwyn alludes to something bad happening to Mira. I do think that's possible, but then Theophanie tries to kill Jack. So then I was like, okay, what's really going on here? What's the play? It seems like Theophanie just did this of her own accord because she considered Jack a liability to the Venin, but was Berwyn aware or unaware that this would happen?
Well, remember what we learned about the Venin in this set of chapters. They lie. So my impression is that Berwyn and Theophanie, as I said earlier, were working together, but then she double-crossed him by trying to kill Jack. Because the implication to me seems to be that Berwyn wanted him back and alive.
Yeah. Regardless, it's clear Theophanie wanted Jack dead, and now, honestly, it made me wonder, is that what she was also doing back in chapter 2? This whole time, it was never a break Jack out mission. It was an assassination mission from the very beginning.
I didn't even think about that. That's such a good question. We just assume they want Jack because, you know, he's a valuable asset to them. He may have intel, but yeah, because why didn't Berwyn try and go get him? If it's his Venin kid, why send Theophanie? So maybe Theophanie was trying to like, fuck you, Berwyn. Wow, that's interesting. Ooh.
She's been double-crossing the whole time.
I like this.
That does add to the icon villain, though, I will say.
Oh my god, she is peak villain. She really is.
Directly after this, Xaden attacks with the stream of shadow aimed at Theophany. But then the bands fly southward instead. And I was like, what the fuck?
What the actual fuck?
Just reminded me of the situation with Indarna's fire in the last set of chapters. Dragonfire didn't burn her. Xaden's shadows basically reflect away from her. Maybe I just need to wait for the reveal at this point because I don't get it. We brainstormed possible ideas last episode, so I won't rehash those. I want to say it's power related, but that seems like enormously overpowered, even for Theophany, considering what her actual signet is.
Agreed. And it sort of makes it impossible to kill her if she can deflect any real threat and also have all these incredibly powerful signet. That's too much.
Also, in the process of going back to find the Iron Flame scene where Jack drained Dane in the Wardstone Chamber, at the end of chapter 59 in Iron Flame, there was an example of Jack doing this as well. And it says, Jack's head swings in our direction and he wields with an outward-facing palm, throwing a shield that deflects Xaden's shadows as blood sprays from Bade's throat onto the Wardstone. And I was like, I was so shocked when I found that because I totally did not catch that.
Sorry. I need to pick my jaw up off the floor right now. Excuse me. I'm going to need a minute to process that. Let me rebuild my reality from the ground up. So, okay.
But that does lead me to believe that maybe it's something about turning Venin that allows them to develop some sort of countering ability, but it's not a signet per se, and it's not restricted to upper level Venin, because Jack is a lower rank than Theophany is. It also could be some sort of rune, because as far as I could tell, I don't believe Jack does it more than once in that scene.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that. We're talking about Jack fucking Barlow deflected Xaden Ryerson's shadows. What? I need to know. I need to know.
Same. Well, I said I wasn't going to rehash things, but here I am still talking about this shit. So the thing that makes the most sense for me is runes. We know runes can do a variety of things, and we've seen how flyers, for example, trade runes and essentially share powers and skills because of that, or like using runes. We saw this in Iron Flame pretty prominently. Is it possible Theophany only has one signet, but then uses runes to make it appear like she has multiple powers? The Venin do have stronger, more pronounced physical abilities like strength, speed, other senses, and I think they can do what the writers consider like minor magics, right? I think they can
Yeah.
kind of like do a
I agree
variety of
with
those
that.
types of things. And maybe they really do only have one true signet. I don't know. I feel like I'm going a little bit crazy from confusion at this point. I feel like at max, it would make sense for me that a Venin could have two signets because we know on the writer side, there are writers that have two signets. So, from like a magic needing to be balanced perspective, that would kind of check out. But beyond that, I feel like it has to be something else,
I agree. This conversation also makes me think back to how in Iron Flame in chapter 45, Trissa says, but runes are the great equalizer. Get good enough at runes and you can compete with a fair amount of signets. And so that sort of supports this idea that runes really will continue to play a larger role in our story. So, yeah, I think that's very interesting.
At this point, Theophanie is plucked up by a wyvern and flies off into the sunset, supposedly, while everyone scrambles to help Mira and Tiny. Side note, if Theophanie can freaking apparate, why is she not just doing that? Unless she truly can't. And that was also a rune. I just want some damn answers. I would also like to make a God Watch call out and note that Violet thinks Malik, please no. And there's another message for Malik we'll address shortly. Things are bad for Mira, and Brennan immediately comes over to start mending Mira. I thought it was kind of odd that Violet thinks Brennan's powerful, but I can't think of a single rider who's been saved on the battlefield with an injury this extensive. Girl, what about your brother? We don't know how extensive Brennan's injury was, but I would imagine getting shot by a crossbow and Naolan dying to save you means your injury was pretty freaking bad. I don't get it.
I thought the exact same thing. I know Violet is obviously under an incredible amount of stress right now because her sister is literally dying in her arms. So I'm going to let Violet slide on this one, but quite literally your brother. Like not another writer, not a friend, your actual brother basically came back from the dead who is literally right next to you. And you're just like, ain't nobody ever come back from a wound like this. Violet, girl. He had a crossbow that's used to kill dragons in his body. At least that's the story we've been told. Did that really do,
supposedly.
Allegedly.
Next, the dragons begin fighting the wyvern. Xaden throws up a wall of shadow, and Garrick and Bodhi close up the Ribestad chest. And then, two red dragons approach, indicating that Sloane and Dane are approaching to everybody's total surprise.
And delight.
If you are here for Eyes Here, Dane. So, second God Watch call out. Just before this, Violet whispers to Malik, you can't have her. And then it says, I swear the clouds darken slightly in acknowledgement. That is very intriguing to me. Is it possible Malik did actually listen or get involved to spare Mira in this instance? It wouldn't be the first time Malik has seemed to be involved in some way. For example, Liam didn't make it, but he shows up as a mental vision for Violet when she's being interrogated in chapter 35 of Iron Flame, and it says, or maybe Malik sent me as a kindness, and Violet thinks Malik doesn't do kindness, nor does he allow souls to wander about. Also, in Iron Flame chapter 62, Violet says, you can't have him. I tell Malik, shifting to kneel in the scarlet snow. You took Liam, and then Sawyer survives. Then last but not least, in chapter 16 of Onyx Storm, Traeger pointed out that the temples for Dune and Malik are disproportionately large in Biscayeth. And that makes sense for a war college, but also it could be an ode to particular involvement for both of these gods. So, to continue on, Brennan begins to struggle as indicated by Morb's roar and Taryn's clarification that Brennan nears the limits of his power, aka burnout. At this point, Crod and Garrick distance wheeled off scene with the Ribestad chest and Jack. First, I wanted to note that Xaden figured Theophanie wanted Jack dead because, he says, he obviously knows things that they don't want us to. So, is Xaden referring to the idea that Jack knows too much about the Venin side that could possibly get leaked? Or does Theophanie know what Jack told Violet and Imogen when they interrogated him toward the beginning of the book?
I think Xaden is saying we need to keep Jack alive because if Theophanie wants him dead, he has information that would be valuable to us. That's how I took it.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. If Theophanie wants him dead, there's no reason she'd want him dead unless he has very high value intel that could be damning for the Venin. So Xaden's like, keep him alive because we need to question him.
Second, I know Dane did some questionable things in Fourth Wing, but we believe he's redeemed himself at this point. So I did give a little bit of a side eye to Xaden and Bodhi when they discuss whether they can trust him, and Xaden says, not enough for what he just saw. I do get their concerns because this is a super important secret to keep on the DL regarding their second signets. But I also don't think the Dane in this book would tattle on them.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, no, Dane, he's not going to do that. Dane would never. He would never. How dare that?
Yeah.
But I mean, to Xaden's point, it's not only the second signet thing, but specifically Garrick's signet is ultra rare and super helpful that he has it and no one knows about it. It gives them a lot of flexibility and a strategic advantage. But as you guys can probably already tell, y'all know I'm a Dane defender, and I really think he has more than proven himself. I get Xaden's concern, but I'm not concerned at all. I wasn't even for a second.
So Sloane and Dane land, Dane having followed suit after Sloane crossed the border against orders, and they immediately come over to help with Mira. One of the first things to note is that Sloane retrieves a cylindrical parcel the length of her hand and tells Violet, Auric told me you would need this. We've already been talking about how we think one of the things that Auric went to go do when he was spotted flying south was likely in relation to retrieving whatever this parcel is. And it got me thinking about Auric's warning to protect Dune's temple in the last set of chapters, and in general, Dune's seemingly important role in watching over Violet and Tyrrendor. Could this be some sort of gift from Dune? That leads me to a couple possibilities. Is this parcel, possibly the wooden-handled dagger Violet conjures in her dream that makes the sage go wide-eyed?
Ooh,
was that sort of like some premonition about a sacred dagger being used somehow? I really don't think a Venin would care that much about a dagger, even an alloy dagger, unless that dagger was something particularly dangerous to them.
Yeah, like it had some extra special property or whatever that made it more lethal. Absolutely.
Right. 2, Auric was also possibly indebted or granted a favor from Dune for relaying the message to protect Dune's temple, and that led him to go retrieve this parcel for Violet because he knows she's going to need it for something. We probably have yet to see. We do learn later that the package is addressed to Auric and bears the unbroken seal of Dune on it. So next, I thought it was interesting that we get a little more info about the siphoning signet and the discussion of transferring versus imbuing power. So based on what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, imbuing refers to the writer pouring only their own magic into something else. Siphons in particular are naturally gifted at imbuing, and it's not a skill that is natural to most signets. Violet is another writer to which imbuing seems to come naturally. For example, she constantly imbues her alloy conduit without much effort at all. All writers and signets can learn to imbue. It just takes more practice than it does for those who are naturally gifted, like a Siphon or Violet.
I believe this is accurate to the information we've been given so far. And if I recall, back in Iron Flame, when Violet first begins discussing the idea of imbuing the Wardstone in Eratia, I think it's Dane or Brennan who says, like, you don't even learn imbuing until 3rd year because it is technically difficult and you need to have a good mastery of your magic and your power and all of that. So I think that all aligns with the world building so far.
So then transferring, however, is the process of a siphon serving basically as like a cable from one power source to another. Kind of like your charging cord for a phone. In this case, Sloane can move power from Dane into Brennan to give him additional power so he doesn't burn out. Sloane has also done this before with Lilith at the end of Iron Flame, but in that instance, she facilitated the transfer of Lilith's power to the Wardstone, so an object, not a person.
It also seems like Sloane can transfer her own personal power if she wants to, but she doesn't know how to do this yet, and it's more dangerous for her, and we know this because Dane says it's dangerous to use your own power if you haven't trained, so take mine. So I think that's important to note that in a pinch, Sloane would be able to imbue or I guess transfer her own power into someone, and that's going to be a really valuable skill, I think, for Sloane and for our characters in the book and the next book, I think.
Right. And that would make sense for what Naolin did.
Yes.
Brennan.
Like he was transferring his own power into Brennan.
Yeah.
But he ran out and there was a well of power just beneath his feet, just asking for the taking.
Venin, supposedly.
Allegedly, but probably.
Sloane has been terrified of her signet because she is afraid this makes her like the Venin, but we know that's not the case because her ability to do this is buffered by the fact that she channels from her dragons. I do think that if she were to, for example, channel from the ground directly to try and imbue something, then, that would turn her into a Venin. Due to her fear about her signet, this is why Sloane stares at the gray handprint that scars Dane's forearm and says, I don't want to do that. Become that. This is also a direct reference to Chapter 60 in Iron Flame when Jack kills Bade in the Wardstone chamber and her body crashing into the Wardstone causes it to crack. During that scene, Dane grabs Jack to read his memories for information, but Jack also grabs Dane's forearms and starts to drain him. Xaden knocks Jack out to stop him, but Violet notes there is, quote, a matching set of gray handprints burned into his skin in the same place where Jack grabbed him.
Just a little side thought here, but based on the info we get in Onyx Storm, it seems like Jack permanently drained the magic from that part of Dane's body, and that's why it's devoid of color. It has been alluded to in this book, and we've talked about it quite a bit, that magic can regenerate with time. I wonder if we will start to see the handprints on Dane's body slowly start to fade with time as an indication that magic can actually slowly regenerate. Remember that conversation with the Irids, and they're if the Venin take over, then basically they'll drain everything in existence, they'll starve, and over time the land will heal itself. And the implication being magic will regenerate, right? We've talked about this a lot.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if we'll see the magic sort of repair itself or regenerate in Dane's body, and you'll see the scars start to fade.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. I wonder how long that would take, though, because, it seems like, considering Dane is constantly exposed to magic because of his dragon, why hasn't it healed by now?
True.
I want it to heal. And so I'm like,
I know, I do too.
But I don't know. To get back to the difference between what Jack did and Sloane, there's a couple things about that. Jack is A Venin, and B, he was draining Dane without his dragon to buffer, and he was taking the power for himself. I do wonder, though, if Sloane siphons energy just to herself from someone, what would that do to her? Even if she is a siphon using her dragon's magic, if she draws... Oh, wait, actually, that's a stupid question, because that is what she's doing when she does one person to another person.
Well, and I was just going to tell you, we have seen her actually pull magic from someone when her signet manifests in that cave when Solus attacks. I forget who she's holding. I think she's holding on to Kat, and she's like, you're draining me. And that's when Sloane's like, oh, holy shit. But they never explain what happens to the power in Sloane's body that she's taken. I would assume it just lives there. She's just charged up like a big battery, I guess.
There were so many notable details, so just bear with us here. With encouragement from Dane, Sloane grabs Dane's wrist, and it's noted her eyes flare and she swallows. Someone like you shouldn't have this much power. And this is where I had my other gift from Zinal thought. Did that slap in Zelna actually serve as a transfer or a blessing of power from Zinal to Dane? Even if that's not the case, it's clear Dane is much more powerful than we have been led to believe so far. And I'm very curious as to why that is and how that's happened. Also, what did Sloane mean by someone like you?
The logical and obvious answer to me is that Dane is just a very gifted and powerful writer, and he is a powerful dragon. He's only a third-year cadet, and I think Sloane just maybe is surprised that he has more power than she thought. Which, to be fair, his signet really doesn't show how much power he has. For example, wind signets, fire, ice, shadows. Most signets, you can see a physical representation of how powerful they are, right? And Dane's, you can't see that. So you really don't have any idea how much power he actually has access to. The someone like you comment, I think, is just a reflection of how Sloane feels that he's still a Navarian. And she's referring to the idea of someone who has supported Navarre, whose father is still in leadership, and who hid behind the wards. And I think she's like someone like you who's not on the side of good and what's right shouldn't get to have that much power. You don't deserve it, right? Because you're one of them, not one of us. Yeah. Because throughout the book, in their very limited reactions, Sloane is constantly flipping off Dane and like smart mouthing him and all of that. She literally says, I hate you to him a couple of times. Obviously, she's just masking her true feelings of passion for him. But,
she's mean flirting. Okay.
She's mean flirting. Hey, you know what? That's what Violet did. Because she was like, I'm not scared of you, Xaden. I'm going to talk shit to you. And it worked. But I mean, I think that's what she means. Someone like you as in the other, you as in the Navarian kind of enemy.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Welcome. Happy to help.
Last but not least, gotta plug Relationship Watch. I loved everything about how Dane offers his own power to use, and then he coaches Sloane through the siphoning process. The spidey senses are tingling to alert us that we're getting closer and closer to a possible relationship with them in the future. Who would have thought, honestly, that we'd go from Codex Bestie Dane in Fourth Wing to Eyes Here Daddy Dane in Onyx Storm? Not me, but I'm here for it, though. We've even got the enemies to lovers thing going on here, so.
Ooh, I like that. That's the best trope, man. That is the best trope. Yeah. It's funny you wrote a Codex Bestie to Eyes Here Daddy Dane, because I wrote from Damn It Dane to Daddy Dane. Very similar sentiment, but whatever you want to call it, I'm here for it. I have loved Dane from the beginning, even in Fourth Wing. I know I'm going to catch some hate for that. Again, as I said multiple times, I did not love all of his choices, but at his core, I believe a lot of his motivations were done out of love and care for Violet. Misguided, but genuine in their intent. I don't know why. I just really want people to know that. It is my mission to convince people that Dane he's a good boy.
I didn't love him in Fourth Wing. I found him to be real fucking annoying. But by Iron Flame, I was like, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. And he redeemed himself. And then I was like, now I can like Dane.
I still loved him too. I can't get into that. If you want to ask me about that, send that and we'll talk about that theories episode on that. But to get back on track, tell me why it was so hot when he said Eyes Here. And then he doubles down on the hotness and it goes from like hot to like burning in hell hot when Sloane says, I'm going to hurt you. And he says, Gods, don't I know it? Rebecca better make this happen for me, okay? She owes me. I loved this. I don't know what it was about it, but it was just charged for me. Yeah. I literally forgot Mira was dying. Dean and Sloane were having a moment.
Distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. Mira, you'll be fine. Okay, just walk it off.
If she wigged up.
Well, yeah.
In all seriousness, I agree. I love Dane's advice when he tells Sloane, you're not a weapon of destruction. You're not Venin. You're the artery power chooses to flow through your life. Chef kiss, Dane. Fortunately, the transferring process is successful and Brandon manages to close up and heal Mira's neck, though she's still unconscious and there's now an angry pink scar. The battle rages on by Drathis' city wall, and at this point, Sloane and Dane depart. And yes, Dane did notice that Garrick and Crawd disappeared into thin air. Then, Brennan takes off with Mira after a reminder to both Xaden and Violet to stick to their respective plans.
I also found it kind of frustrating that Violet takes the time to look at the package from Arik and even thinks about throttling him later, but then doesn't open it. Wouldn't you want to just take a quick glance at what was so important he sent Sloane into a fucking war zone to give it to you? Again, it calls into question Violet's questioning nature. I mean,
right.
Because there's a good chance you're not going to have a moment later. I just feel like that plus the whole like, Violet, you have to protect Dune's temple. It's how you save Arisha. Plus this, Violet should have been like, let me see what the fuck this is up. Especially after she saw the emblem of Dune's temple. And she's like, I'll think about that later. No, girl, open that up now.
She ain't nosy like us, okay?
Apparently not. Apparently,
not nosy.
God. We need to have a little chit chat with Violet and tell her.
We know Addison wants to open people's mail. Like, that would be her job.
I sure do. You can find out a lot about people in their mail.
For Violet not to open this mail is a sin.
Unopened mail is upsetting to me.
I also found it interesting that as Violet watches Brennan leave, she thinks, weird, there's no mark at the back of his neck like he carries on his palm. there hadn't been one on Dane's wrist either. I am trying to figure out what I think this means. We know as a siphon, it makes sense that Sloane wouldn't leave a mark because her signet naturally allows her to transfer power. She was not draining power like a Venin would, thus no mark. But mostly I find it odd that Violet is referring back to that weird rune-shaped scar we know Brennan has on his palm. What am I missing here? Is this a small ode to the fact that maybe Brennan did channel through his palm and thus is a Venin? What does this mean?
What does it mean? Thank you, Justin Bieber. I agree. This thought does not make sense to me. It does not track any logical world building that I can piece together. I'm like, Violet, this is the thing you're going to wonder about, not of the million other things that would be much more helpful and make more sense. I don't know. I could not track her train of thought and why this is relevant to her in this moment.
Okay, this is kind of random.
Let me hear it.
Okay, so I have seen some speculations that because Venin put their hand on the ground and channel, and so like that's how he got the scar or whatever. But I find it kind of interesting that it says it's rune-shaped. And for some reason, it's also making me think of the tattoos that the priestesses have on their forehead. I don't think there's ever been any evidence to support that those things are shaped the same or share any resemblance to each other. But we do know that Brennan's secret name, Aeserai, means resurrection or resurrected or something like that. Brennan did come back to life. This can sound like way out of left field, okay? So I'm so sorry.
That is not going to shock anyone that's ever listened to this podcast.
It's okay to totally be like, this is super crack, Lorraine, go to bed. What if it's like a dedication thing, but it's to Malik because Brennan came back to life?
Oh, like Brennan died, met Malik, but came back, and Malik like marked him. I'm going to be honest with you, Lorraine, that is not the craziest thing you said on this podcast. Like, I was like really ratcheting up the crazy meter. Like, I was like, oh, she's going to say something real unhinged. We're going to have to edit this out later. But you know what? That's not the craziest thing I've ever heard you say. So
good. I'm glad.
It's pretty medium spicy for you know?
Thank you. Thank you. Just a thought. Obviously, there's no evidence for any of that. So it's like 100% just like crazy speculation. But anyways, the main point is we better get some answers about that scar on his palm because it's referenced all the freaking time and it's never talked about.
Of everything that we didn't find out in this book, that is the most upsetting to me. That is the one thing I really was like, I want to know about that. I want to know about Nayland. And I don't know for sure, we haven't finished the book, but I don't think we're going to get that. That is the one thing that I'm like, God damn it. Like that will keep me up at night for the next 2+ years.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, okay. At this point, Zaddy leaves as well with a breathless kiss and tells Violet, do not turn, do not die, accomplish your mission, and I will find you after. This leaves Violet and Bodhi, and I also found it interesting that Sigale also leaves Violet with the message, get off the ground and stay with him, referring to Taryn.
I also laughed so hard after Xaden left and Bodhi turns to Violet and says, now that the Duke of Angst is gone. As if we needed one more nickname for Xaden, like the Duke of Angst. That is so perfect. I love it.
So to close us out, just when you feel like you can take a breath, because Mira is alive. Unfortunately, there's more problems to come.
As we've grown fond of saying while deep diving this book, ain't nothing can ever be easy. And we'll see that continue because it did not get better.
More money, more problems, more power, more problems. So that ends chapter 59. Moving on to chapter 60, the final chapter. So the excerpt, praise Amari for a short excerpt. She knew we needed a break. Was from Colonel Kaori's Guide to Dragonkind, and it simply states the only thing more stubborn than a dragon is its rider. But I feel like this needs to be reversed. In my opinion, the dragons are way more stubborn because they only do things that they want to do. And honestly, their stubbornness outshines that of a rider any day.
You're probably right. It probably should be reversed. Honestly.
For example, Andarna going wherever she wants, Taryn making leadership decisions for Violet. Quite literally in this chapter, Cure plucks Bodhi from the ground against his will.
Oh, totally.
That being said, we do see stubbornness from writers as well. Violet has refused to listen to orders many times throughout this series, as have many other characters. So, I mean, that speaks to this excerpt, but the dragons are more stubborn, I think.
You're probably right, but I don't know. When you start thinking about all the writers, name a writer who isn't stubborn. Violet, stubborn as hell. Xaden, Sloane, Bodhi, Mira. I think it's quite literally a requirement to be a writer. So, you know what? They deserve each other.
Yeah. So the next problem revolves around what to do with Tiny, who has not woken up yet. I found it notable that in response to Violet suggesting Garrick distance wheeled him up the cliffs, Bodhi responds that he would be too tired to do so right now because he's already exhausted from walking all over the continent in the last few hours. We've already kind of touched on this, but this in general is referring to Garrick needing to go get Jack from Biscayeth and going to many places so far.
Please refer to all the steps I listed out earlier in the episode. I also think it's important to note that Garrick is powerful enough to distance wield and move a giant fucking ass dragon. That's crazy to me. He's like, he could do it normally, but he's a little tired. I'm like, he can move a dragon, which I guess he moves with his own dragon. But for some reason, I feel like that doesn't count because that's how he gets his power. But to move like a second dragon, I'm like,
right.
Damn.
I know.
I know.
I know.
That came out real country.
Wow. It did. Okay. Violet then asks Taryn if he'd be willing to carry Tiny. Taryn is understandably hesitant to leave Violet, and she tells him, if I leave, everything falls apart. Dragonkind protects its own, even above a bonded rider. Then Taryn responds, do not lecture me on the laws of my kind, or you will learn how comfortable I am breaking them. I do wonder how many laws, like dragon laws, Taryn has already broken for Violet. I do love this, though, because Taryn definitely does basically whatever he thinks is best. If that means breaking a rule, so be it. And that is much like Violet, honestly.
Yeah, totally fair. Also, technically, him leaving Violet vulnerable puts his own life at risk. And if Violet dies, there's a good chance Taryn will die and then Sigale. So I don't think he'd technically be breaking a rule if he insisted on staying, because he is putting his own life and the life of Sigale, dragonkind, above Violet.
True.
So
Taryn ultimately agrees to take Tiny, leaving Violet with Bodhi and Cure and me with anxiety, especially because Violet thinks I'm not fond of being prey.
And once again, we are set up for the Taryn is just a few minutes out trope. Violet is in danger and Taryn is nowhere to be found. And I know she told him to go and it's for Tiny and all that, but once again, Violet is in imminent danger and Taryn's a few minutes out.
Not even a few minutes. He's like,
that's true. He's gone for a little while.
He gone. Yeah.
He gone.
Bodhi and Violet begin their short-lived waiting period, and Bodhi asks, you think this will work? To which Violet says, has to. Magic requires balance, right? And then, out of freaking nowhere, Theophanie responds, it's the oldest rule there is. And
once again, so cool, so suave. What a cool entrance, you know?
I mean, yeah, but where the fuck did she come from? Like, where was she hiding? How did she sneak up on them so silently? Did she actually apparate this time? Like, distance wheeled in, you know? Once again, would love some clarification on exactly how the balance works. Are signets on the riders and the Venin side exactly 1-to-1 and apples to apples, or does the overall average of power on either side just need to balance out? But aside from that, Theophanie's quote was notable when she says, once a century or so, we get a chance to skew the scales in our favor, and I will prove myself to him this time. This sets us up for the big reveal about Violet's truly unique lightning signet, as well as Theophanie's true signet, so we'll just hold off for a moment until we get there. But keep this in mind. We've also discussed that it's likely there is a top Venin, and that is reinforced by Theophanie stating, I will prove myself to him this time. We're waiting to see who him actually ends up being, but this also means Theophanie has been trying to get his approval for quite a while, and I kind of wonder why they care. Does she need a head Venin's approval to level up in power or rank, or what do they gain from this hierarchy or approval process, I guess?
That's a good question, actually. Like, why is it not just every Venin for himself?
Yeah.
This also stood out to me because I want to know what circumstances are necessary to create the opportunity to tip the balance of nature. She says once a century or so. Does that mean it's dictated when a lightning or shadow wielder manifests, or is it dictated by something else? I had my epiphany earlier in real time with you guys. I kind of like my idea about maybe Violet is the criterion for humans and how they treat the gift of magic. And I'm going to go with that. I got to be honest, guys, that has been spinning in the back of my mind the entire time this episode has been recording because I'm like, oh my God. So
I also wondered if this applies to any of the ultra rare signets because she says once a century or so we get a chance to skew the scales. And I don't think it's like we're getting a lightning wielder every single century, right?
I don't think so, no. I do remember when she manifests, Card tells her the only record he could find of another lightning wielder was more than a century ago. And that's how he tells her that little bit of information that you can overheat with lightning wielding. And then we get that excerpt at the beginning of Onyx Storm where it's like those lightning wielding and shadow wielding has only manifested concurrently 2 other times in history. So we don't know for sure, but it does seem like lightning wielding has popped up roughly every century or so.
I guess maybe. But I was just wondering if this applies to any of the ultra rare signets.
It could, yes.
Perhaps signets of the first 6, like any of those signets that the first 6 potentially had, manifest kind of cyclically. I kind of went back and forth because Theophanie points to lightning being the tipping point in this instance, and there seems to be an emphasis on the importance of a lightning and shadow wielder manifesting concurrently as well. That seems to be another step to the importance of these signets. So anyways, Violet attempts to channel from Tarn, but womp womp, he's out of range. So she warns Bodhi she's fast. I wasn't surprised that Theophanie heard her because the Venin have heightened senses, but it did pique my interest when Theophanie says, there's only a few of us who are faster or older too. Pity you had to kill them. They take forever to generate. Are you ready to tip the balance, Violet? One thing I don't like about Theophanie is that she talks about seemingly 2 different things as if they're the same thing. So this kind of confused me because Theophanie says us, implying other Venin existing who are faster and older than her. But then she says they take forever to generate. And I was like, what? You're talking about a wyvern? That makes more sense to me than her talking about it taking a super long time to become a top Venin. Because Venin don't really like generate in the same way that wyvern do. Mostly, I think she's probably referring to a wyvern because she says, pity you had to kill them. And I feel like if Violet had killed some top Venin, we would have heard about it by now. But we know that the Venin create wyvern. Because in chapter 57 of Iron Flame, Mira and Violet go investigate a dead wyvern and find a, quote, polished chunk of what appears to be onyx marked with a complex rune.
I have to be honest, to me, it seemed pretty clear. She's indicating there are only a few Venin who are older than her and faster than her. And then when she says, pity you had to kill them, they take forever to generate. She's talking about the wyvern. Because she's also like walking around that dead wyvern's body. The bit about the wyvern did stand out to me though, because it's been asked by the fandom and the characters in the book, why now? The Venin presumably have been hanging out for a while now. So why all of a sudden are the Venin back and launching an attack against Navarre and poor Meal? I'm wondering if it has to do with how long the wyvern take to generate. Obviously, Theophanie's not going into specifics here, but, she says they take forever. And for an immortal person to be saying something takes forever, that probably means it takes a long time. So then I'm wondering if it takes years or even centuries to generate them. What if they've been just biding their time, waiting for 2 things to happen? 1, an opportunity to tip the balance, and 2, to generate so many wyvern that they have hundreds or thousands of them, and they feel confident they have enough to actually contend with the dragons. And that's why they're all of a sudden attacking now.
That would make a lot of sense to me. Also, just as like a random question about the wyvern, when they say generate, are they like making these wyvern totally from scratch, just magically creating them? Or are they taking fallen dragons and then putting the runes in them and turning them into wyvern that way?
That's a great question. No idea. There's no way to answer that. The thing is they would have to be collecting dead dragon bodies forever. And I feel like people would notice if a dragon died and the bodies were disappearing. That seems kind of odd to me. So I would assume they're being made with magic.
Right. This is also another side thought. If the magic is not regenerating that quickly, just based off of like our speculations about the Isles and everything, how are the Venin surviving this long? Because they've already drained like so much of the magic that was already there. And yet they're still just living for like centuries beyond that. I don't know. Was there really that much magic? And how have they not already taken all of the magic that was available by now? And like, how the fuck are they still alive? Basically,
that's some real, we need math on how many Venin are there actually? Are there 50 of them? Are there 100 of them? Are there 1,000 of them, right?
Right.
I think the number is actually lower than you would think. I think there's hundreds max. And then you have to ask yourself, how much magic do they need just to sustain themselves? It's probably not that much. This is kind of a weird example. Could they drain just one singular tree? And how long would that sustain them? If a Venin could drain one single tree and live for months or a month, you could last a long time. Or just drain one single human, because what's a magic source that keeps recreating itself? Humans. More humans keep getting birth. And so if they just need to drain one human a month just to live, whatever. So I would assume that they're doing it based off draining people.
Okay. Hopefully we'll get some clarification about how the wyverns are created at some point as well, but it ain't going to be now. So in regards to tipping the balance, Violet thinks that having two lightning wielders would destroy the balance and then thinks the same as shadows. Based on Theophanie's additional commentary later, do you really think a shadow wielder could tip the balance as much as a lightning wielder could? I think it would certainly be a big deal for the Venin to have a shadow wielder, but Theophanie's specific comments about implying Violet's lightning is the tipping point and she has no counter, yada yada, makes me feel like lightning is more important.
It's close for me power-wise. I think, to me, a little bit it depends on the rider and the dragon they bonded. Will Lynx ever be as strong as Xaden? Or will it be physically impossible for him because he bonded a less powerful dragon? It's notable that Violet is powerful because of her signet, but also the age and power that Terran possesses. So I'm going to say lightning, but not by much, I don't think.
So Violet throws a dagger at Theophanie unsuccessfully and then thinks, was this the path the priestess foresaw for me? Not their mentorship, but Theophanie's. I think we kind of touched on this in the last episode when Violet talks with Mira and Brennan about what the priestess said and grandma and everything. But I feel like this has been set up as a red herring. Like the heart that beats within you or for you will turn. And then her thought here, I think we are led to think maybe Violet will turn Venin, but when you actually think about it, I feel like there's no way. Violet turning Venin would absolutely kill the storyline, so I don't think it's that. I think the priestess is still referring to something different when she says paths. We just don't know what that is yet. Theophanie also makes odd comments about Bodhi, stating he reeks of his kin and asks, do you not grow tired of being a less powerful version of your cousin? So first of all, Theophanie does know Bodhi is Xaden's cousin. And second, we've already talked about this, we kind of feel like Theophanie has a little bit of some premonitions type stuff going on. It's either that or she knows stuff because she was, quote, working with Berwyn before she double-crossed him.
Or any number of spies in Navarian leadership that have been feeding her this intel.
Yes.
She's got a couple options on how she can find things out.
I do point this out, though, because Bodhi says, I'm not the one out here trying to prove myself. And Theophanie says, you're almost done waiting. He'll be gone soon. The crown will be yours. The he'll be gone soon, it's like she's talking about Xaden, and this is a reference to him meeting Berwyn, like we thought, because of the dreams. And obviously, all of these dreams were just a trap. But the crown will be yours part. I feel like that's some future shit. Like, and we know Tyrandor is not currently independent. So if anything happens to Xaden, Bodhi would become the next duke, but a duke doesn't have a crown. Thus, why it feels like there's some premonition stuff going on. If Theophanie has been alive since the Great War, for example, depending on the timeline and stuff, it's possible she was alive when all the provinces were independent kingdoms, like prior to unification. We've had the sense that history is kind of repeating itself, so maybe she just knows or sees something about the pattern of events that makes Theophanie believe Tyrandor will become its own kingdom again. So in that case, maybe premonition is like the wrong word. But she knows something about the cycle of things that leads her to think Tyrandor will become independent. So, I don't know. Also, the implication that Bodhi is protecting Violet, what do you think that is about?
I mean, yeah, of course he is. Likes Violet. She's important to the war effort. She's important to Xaden. They're friends. The whole conversation, honestly, is so cryptic. I feel like either everything has a double meaning or she's really just saying what she means. This conversation made me ask myself, again, does she have that intrinsic ability? Or can she do some kind of mind work and she's reading Bodhi? I don't know. This conversation, I was just kind of left befuddled. And I'm just like, well, I'm not going to get any resolution on this. It's weird. I'm going to bookmark it. And I just kept it moving.
Theophanie begins some low-key storm shit, during which Violet and Bodhi quickly learn that Bodhi's countering signet does not work on Theophanie, and Violet's realization that Theophanie is not a lightning wielder. The lightning was simply a byproduct of her true signet. Yikes.
That's some real king prawn shit right there.
Theophanie tells Violet there's only one exception to the rule, Violet Sorrentgale. Imagine my surprise when it turned out to be you. If it was going to be one of her daughters, I'd have bet on your sister. Why would Theophanie even think either of Lilith's daughters would become a lightning wielder? How did she know this? We'll talk about how this also means Theophanie and Lilith have met, in a little bit, but King Prawn, jaw dropped.
Just one more thing to add to the watch list. We also can't ignore that she says there's only one exception to the rule, Violet Sorrentgale. I think the rule she's referring to is that nature likes all things in balance. I think this means that Violet does, in fact, not have a counter Venin who can wield lightning, and that's why they all want her so badly, because it will tip the scales, because she's an exception to the rule of balance. Which also feeds into my Violet is the human criterion theory. Just gonna plug that again. If she turns, I think it means another lightning wielder will not manifest because of whatever weird nature exception that Violet has. And that's why everyone is vying for control of Violet, because we'll tip the scales.
Right. A lightning signet is somehow truly one of a kind. So, we're kind of talking a little bit in circles, but this is like where I formally started thinking about what this means. So, I mean, how do you get one signet that is allowed to go unchecked? And so some of my other thoughts at this time were, is this because of Dune? Is this because of Terran or Indarna? I mean, in some ways it makes sense. Violet's lightning is seemingly the only signet that can kill Venin and Wyvern, but why lightning? Just generally speaking as a signet, why lightning?
Yeah, why not shadows? Ice wielder. I mean, any of them. Yeah, agreed.
Very shortly after all this, Violet also realizes Theophanie was the answer to Lilith, to which Theophanie responds she was the answer to me. And I was like, okay, Theo, calm down. It's not a competition. I'm just kidding.
I like calling her Theo. That's fun. I like that.
Chill out, Theo. It's not that deep. First of all, truly, I did not realize Theophanie was a storm wielder. We've mentioned being on Stormwatch and storms being a thing with Theophanie, but I honestly was just thinking of storms being like the natural progression of lightning wielding because I was conflating the two things. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that they wouldn't be the same, but safe to say, I was shook.
Oh, I know. The worst part is we literally called out Stormwatch. We're like, oh, if there's a storm, it probably means Theophanie is there and she's using it to control the lightning. We literally called it Stormwatch and did not put together that she creates the storms. And that is so humiliating. I'm just like, damn. I know our listeners are kind of balanced between people who are reading it with us and people who have already read it. I just know y'all people that have already finished the book. Y'all were like, y'all dumb motherfuckers. It's right in front of you. I pulled a Violet, okay? The logical pieces were there, and I was like, not focusing on it.
See, this is another thing, because everybody was like, she's a lightning wielder. And we're like, okay, everybody's saying she's a lightning wielder. That must be fact, not a fact.
We look so dumb right now. It's right there in front of you. There's a fucking tornado. Theophanie appears. The fall of Suniva happened during a storm, and I'm just mad at myself, honestly. I hate to make myself look even worse, but quite literally in the chapter with Theophanie and the tornado, chapter 10, the excerpt is this. Weather is the one great equalizer in battle, equally detrimental or favorable to both sides given the conditions. Without our wielders swaying the element to our advantage, we are at its mercy. And I'm like,
True.
it was right there. It was low-hanging fruit. And we were like, nah. It just...
I mean, okay, but you don't know what you don't know until you, like, find out more information, and then it all clicks. So
I don't know, man. This one feels
I'm not
pretty
going
on
to
the
be
nose.
too hard on myself. If you got it, great. Like, I'm very happy for you. I did not, and it is what it is. Anyways, this does explain so much for both us and Violet. Violet thinks, the tornado. My mom had never accomplished that particular feat. No wonder I hadn't recognized Theophanie for what she is. I'd never met a more powerful storm wielder than Mom until now. Violet realizes how massively fucked she is and urges Bodhi to leave, who is still dumbstruck to learn that his signet doesn't work on Venin. But I do have to wonder, like, why is that? If I was Bodhi, I would honestly be pretty freaking pissed and devastated. This quite literally makes him, like, so vulnerable against the Venin. Because all he has is hand-to-hand or physical weapons, like alloy daggers, basically, you know?
Yeah. Well, and he even says, it doesn't make sense. I'm supposed to be the balance for all of them. He's supposed to be able to counter any signet. And so, I mean, yeah, it sucks for him. I get that.
I guess when you really think about it, though, does anyone's signet really work on the Venin? They can fight a... Well, yeah, I'm getting to that.
Oh,
okay.
sorry. Like,
most people can fight against the Venin with their signets, but to our knowledge, Violet's signet is the only one that can actually kill a Venin, and thus why she's, like, the exception to the rule. So, like, realistically, from that perspective, it doesn't really feel like anybody else's signets can actually work on the Venin, quote unquote.
I think it's possible non-battle signets might work, like Sloan or Dane's, for example, but anything battle-wise, like Firewind, etc., pretty much useless. I think you're right about that. Maybe a Venin could shoot some power at them, and Brittany could throw up a shield of ice that would block the power, but ultimately, you're right. Fire can't kill them, ice can't kill them, etc. We know that mind work works on the Venin because in Iron Flame, Kat uses her mind work on the Venin that tries to attack her and Violet. I think it's possible maybe some of the mind signets might work, but we don't have any confirmation of that other than the example with Kat. It does seem like it goes against the whole nature likes things in balance. If Venin signets can work on Riders, but Rider signets can't work on Venin, that feels really unfair. That doesn't feel balanced. So just another thing. I don't know.
So Violet also remembers that Theophanie knows Violet would try to save everyone, so she has to stay. And before Bodhi can protest anymore, Kira makes the decision for him and just plucks him up. I know I'm not supposed to laugh, but it was funny. The windstorm continues to pick up while Theophanie tries to get Violet to come to the dark side. Hiding behind a tree, Violet cleverly weighs down a Marasite arrow with a rock so it doesn't blow away in the wind, and then she chucks it at Theophanie. Theophanie knocks it away, but the explosion sends Theophanie flying half a wing length into the air. And I was like, Theo the Ragdoll!
I love Theo so much. Something about that really humanizes her, and I love it.
Freaking Theo. This was also kind of funny to me because she's like this powerful Venin, nothing can stop her, arrow blows up, she goes flying. Something about that is just kind of funny to me because I also thought it was interesting that as long as the storm hasn't gained enough traction to continue on its own, it will cut out if Theophanie stops wielding or gets stopped. In general, though, I gotta hand it to Violet. She's bold as fuck for the arrow, stabbing Theophanie in the thigh and just taking her on without any access to her power, because that could never be me.
You know, I know Violet is a badass, but when you say it like that, I'm like, damn, you're right. Especially because Violet doesn't even hesitate, even though she knows it is highly, highly likely she will die. And she's like, fuck you, Theophanie. I'm like, you know what? You go, Violet.
As the two fight, Theophanie's next words give us some additional context when Theophanie says, your mother knew at your age that she was no match for me. That's why she hid behind those wards. So this solidly confirms Lilith and Theophanie knew of each other and had possibly battled when Lilith was about 21-ish, because that would be the same age as Violet. I feel like this adds a lot of context as to why Lilith also played into Navarre's lies. She genuinely had no idea how they could ever defeat the Venin when Lilith presumably was thought to be the strongest rider they had at the time. So it would make sense that they'd rather focus on keeping the wards up and the venom out. Not that I agree with that from an outsider perspective, but I get it. Also, why didn't Lilith tell anyone about Theophanie? Many people in leadership seemed surprised to learn of Theophanie, and they were also wrongly under the impression that she was a lightning wielder. And I was like, why would you keep something like that? I mean, I guess Navarre was hiding the venin from everybody, but leadership knew about it. And so, I don't know, it's just weird to me that you wouldn't at least tell leadership.
Yeah, such a dicey question because, like, Devera is technically leadership, but Devera is just as shocked as all the cadets already heard that Venin have signets.
Right.
But maybe she did tell them, but only, like, Melgren and Tari know. Only, like, a handful of people know. And we also know leadership could have shifted and changed. We don't know how long Melgren's been in power, how long Lilith was in power. Like, we just don't have all the nuance and details for that. I would assume she told somebody.
I guess, but then what do they do with that information?
Nothing. They just hide behind their ward.
So Theophanie taunts Violet, reminding her of all the innocent people that could die in the Madara Pass, and tells her it must be killing you, realizing you don't have every answer, aren't the solution to every problem. You're just another lightning wielder, mortally incapable of being everywhere at once.
I like that Theophanie says to her, so stubborn. And it ties in very nicely with the excerpt for this chapter.
Considering how Theophanie was all like, you're the tipping point, etc. earlier, now I'm like, bish, which one is it? Is Violet important or not? Because now you seem to imply that she ain't special. I don't get it. Moving on. Violet, my Shayla. She leans right into Theophanie's knife at her neck and responds, you're right. I can't be everywhere. I don't have to be, which surprises Theo. And then she thinks, I'm not the best of us. She is. Once again, badass alert. I don't feel great about this, but I also feel like Violet has some plot armor, as you like to say, so I think we'll be okay. I, at this point, really just don't know how she's going to get out of it. That's my main question.
Mm-hmm.
Also, who do you think she is when Violet says, I'm not the best of us? She is. I'll admit, just from sneak peeking the POV of the next chapter, I think I know, but I probably shouldn't say it, so I won't.
All right. So I actually have a minor crazy crack theory to present here. I'm going full Lorraine. What if when she says she is, she's actually talking about Quinn and Violet isn't really there? Quinn is a fucking astral project. Okay. No, listen.
Okay.
There's all these conversations about utilizing everyone's signet and working together as a team. And what if Quinn is fucking astral projecting Violet to Theophanie? And guys, I'm just going to be really fucking honest. It was like 3 a.m. when I wrote this, so it's probably reflective of that. When it said Violet arched her neck towards the blade, I was like, there's no way Violet is killing herself. And I don't know what the hell else she'd be doing by pushing her neck against the blade. And then when I read she is, I was wondering who the she they're talking about. Violet has been very upfront from the beginning that she is not strong enough to defeat Theophanie. And I just cannot believe that Xaden, Brennan, or Taryn, especially Taryn, or really anyone would let her go against Theophanie alone because it is quite literally suicide. But I do think they would let Violet try some crazy-ass body-swapping trickery to give them the advantage they need. And who has a signet that would let us pull off something like that? Fucking Quinn. I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to be laughing tomorrow when I finish the book. And I'm like, wow, that was really a dumb idea. I'm just saying, you know?
Upon initially reading this, I was like, ooh, that would be really interesting. However,
tear me down with logic. How dare you?
Okay, yeah. Girl, you do it to me all the time. So
I know.
Here I am doing it as well.
You're my balance. I need you.
So, do we know if an astral projected version of someone can physically do something? Like stab Theophanie with a dagger, for example. My impression was that astral projection simply creates an image, like a projector would.
Fair.
So it can serve as an optical illusion if you're not too close. But you couldn't physically do things with it. Now, granted, Quinn can probably make a pretty good double of somebody. But if you were to touch them, you'd be like, oh, you're not fucking real. That being said, it would be really cool if Quinn's projection could become strong enough to actually double body somebody in real life. So I don't know. Maybe that's where Quinn's projection will go. But that was probably my main counter. Also, if that's the case and like it is kind of just a projection, if Theophanie touched her, I feel like Theophanie would know.
Probably.
You know?
You're probably right. It probably is super unrealistic and that's probably not what's happening. But I was just like, who's the she? Who could she be talking about?
To end on a good note, though, you bet I noticed when Violet thinks Dune be with them. And I bet Dune is going to come back to help her favorite child once again. So, God watch. The gods are coming into play. But yeah, anyways, so that now officially concludes the assembly. And now we just have our favorite moments to wrap up the show. My first favorite moment is when Violet thinks choice determines our future. Plain and
That's a
simple.
nice thought. Unless you've been partially dedicated to the gods and the gods have ordained your future. Am I right, Lorraine?
Yeah, absolutely.
My first favorite moment is when Xaden says, whatever calculations you make, just know that I'll be going with Violet. And I just love, he's always just like, first thing you need to know about me, I go where Violet goes. And everyone's yeah, we know.
My next favorite one is when Violet thinks she dies for this, referring to Theophanie. And then, of course, like Taryn chimes in too. And he's like, yes, like he's ready to.
Yeah, they're ready for
burn
blood.
Theophanie if she could burn. But yeah.
I know I already said this earlier in the episode, but Theophanie is good at being bad. And I loved when she said, first thing to learn about us is that we're careful with our words. And the second, we also lie. And that was cool. It was a cool moment.
That's true. Oh, dang it. Okay, that was the one that I wanted to add to my list is her time to play Violet.
Oh,
like that one from
throw it on there.
From Theophany too. That was another line that I liked. I just didn't have it on our notes, guys, but iconic. The next one I liked is everything about Dane helping Sloane, but when he tells her you're not a weapon of destruction, you're the artery power chooses to flow through your life.
My last two are also something that Dane said, but in a little bit different vibe. First, when he said, eyes here. Then when Sloane says, I'm going to hurt you. And he says, gods, don't I know it? Ooh. Woo! I'm going to go back and listen to that part again.
Eyes here, Dane.
Eyes here, Dane.
My final one to close out the episode is when Taryn tells Violet, do not lecture me on the laws of my kind, or you will learn how comfortable I am breaking them. That now concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked Up Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers. The sage warns them both that oh my gosh. Okay.
Nelson jumped up back here.
Yeah, he did. He's like, I want to be on camera. He's like, I'm cute. Almost die in front of Violet. Well,
she's about to dilate.
She's about to dilate.
Violet. Oh, oops, I read the wrong version. I did rephrase it. So you're on mute.
Oops. Does that mean it's when it's dedicated? Oh, it dictated. Does that mean it's dictated?
That's all we've got for you guys today. So, oops. Damn it. Okay.